I now note that the hour has come and this hearing is called to order. This is a public hearing of the Joint City Council Committees on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless, and licenses and inspections. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony on resolution number 240267. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Phillips. Present. Councilmember Bass.
Present.
Councilmember Jones.
Present.
Vice Chair Landau. Present. Chair Driscoll.
Present.
And Chair Gaudier.
Present. Thank you, Ms. Jones. I note for the record that a quorum of this committee is present and this hearing is called to order. I'm excited to be leading today's hearing alongside Chairman Mike Driscoll and Minority Whip Nicholas O'Rourke, who is on his way. Last week, we were right here in this room as Mayor Parker announced her proposal to spend $800 million on housing initiatives. I could not be more excited because Philly's affordable housing crisis is primarily a funding issue. The city already has several programs that successfully create and preserve affordable housing, but their budgets are just too small to meet the need. This is especially true when it comes to our rental housing stock. As a district council member and a renter myself, every day I see how Philadelphians struggle between a rock and a hard place. Should vulnerable renters continue to live in unhealthy or even unsafe conditions because the rent is good? Or take their chances on the market where they know they won't be able to find an affordable place to live? Let me be clear, this is not a choice that anyone should have to make. And while greedy corporate landlords force renters into this deplorable situation, the truth is that the city's lackluster enforcement of the rental code enables it. That is why we are here today to reaffirm how important it is to use our once-in-a-generation $800 million investment in housing to repair and maintain our rental housing stock. Philadelphia is one of the only major cities that does not regularly inspect its rental units. Think about what kind of message that sends to landlords and tenants. Corporate landlords who get rich off of our constituents must be held accountable to the legal standards mandated by council, and tenants need to know that their city will protect them. This is not just a theoretical concern for my office. A few years ago, one of the apartment buildings in our district had a fire followed a year later by a monoxide leak that killed one of the tenants. And when we investigated this building, we found that despite egregious safety concerns, residents did not call L&I to report many of the issues because of the fear of retaliation in some cases and a simple lack of information in others. Proactive inspections might have saved a life and would have definitely saved an entire apartment building from sudden and traumatic displacement. But proactive inspections alone are not enough because we know that mom and pop landlords often struggle to afford repairs while keeping the rents low. And that's why programs like the Rental Improvement Fund, a targeted investment that uplifts community-oriented small landlords, keeps vulnerable residents in high-quality homes and pushes back against gentrification, and is a very important program. When we launched this program in my council district in August 2023, we heard from neighborhood landlords like Steve Hawkins in Garden Court. With our help, Steve fixed his roof and installed new floors, ceiling fans, countertops, tiles, toilets, and windows without meaningfully raising the rent. I look forward to today's discussion and learning more about how we can use a carrot and stick approach to uplift those who want to do well by doing good, while also holding corporate landlords who take advantage of vulnerable renters accountable. Thank you so much. Chair Driscoll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I think she does deserve a round of applause. And it has to be one of our top priorities this year. And this joint hearing is so important. And I'm really looking forward to our testimony today. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have opening remarks? Councilmember Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Gaudier. This is indeed an important subject matter in the city of Philadelphia, and we certainly have to find ways to address it. One of the things I'll say is that even in our district, in the city, hold on, I'm just looking for what I had. No, it was right here. Oh, sure was. Thank you. All right, thank you. Teamwork, right? We got teamwork. But yes, good morning, colleagues, advocates, and neighbors throughout the city. As a representative of the 9th District, I've seen firsthand the consequences of a system that fails to protect renters. In 2022, the residents of Lindley Towers in the Logan section of our district, right here in the 9th, were forced from their homes after a partial building collapse. More than 100 of our neighbors were displaced, losing not only their homes, but their sense of stability. So this tragedy actually could have been very preventable. The city has since filed a lawsuit against the building's owner, Lindley Tower Realty Company, which continued to rent apartments despite its rental license expiring in 2021. For years, residents reported hazardous conditions, but their complaints were unanswered. Even after the collapse, some were pressured to sign agreements, waiving their rights in exchange for temporary housing. So this is exactly why we need stronger rental code enforcement and proactive inspections. Philadelphia is one of the few major cities without a regular rental inspection program, leaving thousands of tenants vulnerable to unsafe living conditions. Right now, only about 7% of the city's rental units get inspected each year, meaning landlords who cut corners and ignore maintenance issues go unchecked until disaster strikes. And even most recently in the northeast city, part of Philadelphia, there was a fire that took place in which 3 of our residents died in the fire. And the daughter, who was not there that evening when the fire took place, who survived, said that they kept complaining to the landlord about all of the hazardous conditions in that home. So what could have imagined if there was a regular check of some of these spaces that maybe that family would have survived? So with that being said, these bad actors are giving our city a bad name. We need policies to distinguish between those who exploit the system and those who follow the rules. We want to support good developers and landlords who invest in our communities and uphold high standards for their properties. And I sincerely, I mean this wholeheartedly, I want to thank Councilmember O'Rourke and Councilmember Landau for introducing this very, very, very important legislation. Thank you so much. Your leadership is essential in making sure we take real steps towards improving rental housing conditions in our city. And for me, I really want them to continue to take this head on. So again, I look forward to working with all of you to make this a reality. Lindley Towers and other places in our city should never happen. Let's get to work. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Landau.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody who came out today. We can't wait to hear how you're going to lend your voices to this effort, this joint effort that is really a culmination of all of our work that we've been doing to improve housing and affordable housing here in the city of Philadelphia, as well as trying to really aid L&I to be the strongest entity it can be to work towards making sure that our housing is safe and accessible for Philadelphians. You know, I've been doing this work for a very long time, and I have, long ago representing tenants, low-income tenants in landlord-tenant court, I still see now some of the same exact trends and things that I've saw through the late 90s on. There are repairs with tenants complaining about repairs. The issues are not fixed, and suddenly either a disaster happens or the tenant has to move out, or the tenant exercises their rights, and suddenly the landlord tries to evict. We've put a lot of new fundamental ways that we are handling housing in there. So there's between good cause eviction and even getting the Eclipse program up in L&I that took so many years to make it happen, where we can actually see any outstanding code violations on a property. We've made so many steps and strides in the process, but we are still not where we need to be. There are ways in which we can standardize this work and make it so that every place that people are renting is safe and accessible. I want to add that, you know, we normalize inspections for businesses all the time. You know, if you have a restaurant, the health department's coming out once a year to check on you. If your facade is falling off of your business, you better believe L&I is coming out there, or you better believe CLIP is right around the corner to give you a ticket. Why is it that we have not yet normalized just inspections of your rental housing? It's a business. This is part of running a business here in Philadelphia. Let's make this happen. Once we normalize this, once landlords know that as business people, the city will be inspecting to make sure just the basic fundamentals are safe and healthy for people to live there, then go ahead, you can go forward and do your business, and people will have safe and great places to live. So I just want to underscore the moment we are here right now with this joint committee hearing, the fact that we all are together at the same time, the fact that the city is coming to the table, we appreciate you so much, the fact that the tenant advocates are saying we will no longer have a Lindley Court or any other place like that in the city of Philadelphia that is good, that will basically fall down on tenants. There are ways we can fix this, and I think this is the moment, this is the time, and I'm so excited to get started. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Member Driscoll, co-chair. I'm from the 4th District, Councilman there. Yes. And there are 2.5 developments I want to bring to your attention. One is called Brith Shalom. The other is called the Pavilion. And the other was Penn Wynn. Member Driscoll, Member O'Rourke, and who else was with us? Went and toured that facility. And I remember that day when we went, it brought tears literally to my eyes as seniors and veterans and people with disabilities had to live in that kind of condition. Brought tears to my eyes, and I'm not the crying type. What I also remember was, remember Driscoll and I stood in front of a apartment unit that had crime tape on it because they had found one of the tenants, Madam Chair, dead. Had been dead for like 3 days. No one checking on that. That's a whole nother aspect of it. So this legislation is important. I want to talk about one other unintended consequences as a freshman when I first got here. I was rah-rah, gung-ho, kicked the door in, where's that landlord? There was a soil pipe on Gaynor Road that had broken in a renter's house. They called me up, said, we can't live like this is bad, come help us. And in doing so, I called L&I. And in doing so, I made her homeless. We have to be intentional about how we structure these things so that as we go about our business trying to do good, that we do no harm. That we do no harm. So with that, I look forward to the discussions. And with that, I look forward to being supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Whip Bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just really wanted to echo the sentiments that have been already spoken. You know, there's no shortage of properties and you know, issues with rental properties. There is no shortage here in the city of Philadelphia. Although it's not every landlord, one landlord who is operating in a way that is unacceptable is one too many. And so I just really look forward to hearing from L&I, my good friend Bridget Collins Greenwell. Hi, Bridget, who I know is working very hard and who is very caring and concerned about these issues. But we've had just such a difficult time for years with enforcement. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing, you know, what are we going to do differently? How are we going to tackle this problem finally? How are we going to really get in front of it so that we do so in a meaningful way, so that we're not here next year or the year after talking about the same thing? We've had this conversation, it feels like many times now, just talking about landlords who are not living up to the expectation, the responsibility, and that I believe puts us as a city, the city of Philadelphia, in harm's way in terms of being liable for folks who are not being responsible landlords. When we put people's safety in jeopardy, when a landlord does it and we don't inspect, we're responsible. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about what we can do to really address what is happening now and how we can prevent it so we don't have this conversation again in the future. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, will you now read the title of the resolution?
Resolution 240267, authorizing the Joint Committees on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless, and licenses and inspections to hold hearings to examine the conditions of rental housing, rental code enforcement, and the need for rental repairs throughout the city of Philadelphia.
I want to acknowledge the presence of Minority Whip Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke, who's also the sponsor of the legislation. Councilmember, do you want to give remarks? I know you're catching your breath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I quickly want to good morning to everyone that is here. It's so grateful to see folks. I am safe in his arms on this morning. I want to thank every testifier, commenter, and guest in the room today that has made it here before I did. I want to thank Chair Driscoll and as well as Rue Landau for your leadership of the Committee on License and Inspections, and to Chair Gautier for leading this hearing as you lead the Committee on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless. We're here to talk about rental housing and the issues that tenants are facing in Philadelphia. In other words, We're here to continue a conversation that's been taking place in these halls, in this room, for decades upon decades upon decades. There are newer elements of this housing crisis, like algorithmic rent pricing, but some of the main concerns we're here to address are literally older than all of us in this room right now. Unimaginable, or I should say unmanageable rents, poor maintenance, the impact of unsafe housing. These are some unfortunate mainstays of urban life. And because these challenges have been with us for so long, we can say with confidence that misalignment or misunderstanding only goes so far as an explanation. At the end of the day, it is a question of power. From landlord-tenant relationships to the state institutions that set the rules for both parties, organized realtors to organized renters, these issues are so often settled on which group has the capacity to act or not act. So I'm particularly grateful to see organized tenants ready to take on issues of rental code enforcement, or the state of rental repairs, because my colleagues and I can certainly agree that our landlords are quite organized. Today, we're going to talk about what people need to make a house feel like a home, and what it takes to ensure that nobody is denied that chance to call where they live home. What's clear is, in some cases, that will require proactive action from local government. In every system, there is a baseline, an average standard. And if the history of urban democracy has taught us anything at all, it's that a baseline standard for housing conditions won't be set if those elected to represent the people don't do it. It's on us, on this council, and these two committees in particular, to hold the line on setting a legal standard for safe, healthy homes. Otherwise, it turns into a race to the bottom for the least responsible bad actor landlords out there. Sadly, we know what that race can lead to. We'll hear about it from some of the panelists today, but I wanted to submit one example for the record. Some of you know the name Janae Campbell. Some may not. 375 days ago, Janae, age 12, breathed her last breath. She had asthma, which wasn't the problem. Her problem, and her family's problem, was a negligent landlord. Over 2 years of ignored repair slips and service requests from her mother, Essie, weren't enough for their landlord to address the structural leaks in their apartment. And because of that negligence, the mildew and the mold that follows leaks also went unchecked. Essie's complaints to Elle and I, and this is not a call out, these are just the facts, didn't make a difference either. In fact, rampant mold is still not a legal cause for a rental habitability violation under our current law. And that's just one of many issues to act on in the coming years. And so, 375 days ago, years of living in an unsafe home caught up with one of the children who were supposed to be this city's future. Janae suffered a fatal asthma attack, and I pray that her memory is a blessing to her loved ones. So for my colleagues, you're going to hear some sizable numbers from some of the folks in attendance today, and you'll soon see some legislation from my office that intends to address many of these issues. Because this race to the bottom, as it were, is in fact costing lives and degrading the quality of life. It's an engine of dysfunction in the life of our city. We're only going to raise our baseline if and when the bad landlords out there actually feel some heat from the work that we do in here. To that I say, let's fire it up and let's get on with this hearing. Thank you so much for your patience and obliging me, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Majority Leader Catherine Gilmore Richardson. Majority Leader, did you want to make any opening comments? Thank you so much. The clerk will please call the first panel of witnesses to testify on the resolution.
Madam Chair, the first witness will be testifying virtually. Their name is Keith David Parsons. Are we ready?
Hello, are you there and connected, Mr. Parsons?
Yes, I am here. Can y'all hear me?
Wonderful. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Keith David Parsons. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, Philadelphia City Council members and staff. I am Keith David Parsons, the Strategic Enforcement Administrator for the District of Columbia Department of Buildings. I'm pleased to appear before you virtually today to discuss proactive housing code inspections and compliance as implemented by the district. But first, I would like to thank Councilmember at Large Nicholas O'Rourke for the invitation to speak to you today, and would also like to thank my agency director, Brian J. Hanlon, and my mayor, the Honorable Muriel E. Bowser. The mature, proactive inspection and alternative resolutions programs I'm about to describe are thanks to their vision and leadership. The District of Columbia Department of Buildings was once part of a larger district agency called the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, or DCRA, which was functionally similar to the Department of Licenses and Inspections in Philadelphia. However, on October 1st, 2022, DCRA was split by law into two successor agencies. DOB retained the zoning, permitting, construction compliance, housing and property maintenance code, and vacant building regulation functions. The licensing, corporate registration, vending registration, and consumer protection functions fell to the other half of the agency, which became known as the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, or DLCP. DOB and DLCP remain close, and both still play a part in the regulation of multifamily housing in the district. DLCP issues the licenses, and DOB conducts the associated inspections. Today, DOB has almost 40 housing code inspectors with jurisdiction over the nearly 300,000 residential addresses listed in the district's master address repository. Many of these inspectors respond to customer complaints, but my testimony today will highlight DOB's proactive inspections program. More than half of the residential units in the district, about 180,000, are licensed multifamily apartment buildings with 3 or more units. As a condition of their licensure, these properties must participate in the proactive inspections program. Smaller properties of 1 or 2 units are inspected when they receive their basic business license to rent. As the name suggests, instead of waiting for a tenant to report a complaint to DOB, the Proactive Inspections Program proactively schedules inspections of licensed properties using a risk-based algorithm to target our efforts. The proactive team is relatively small, with only 9 inspectors, but conducts more than 16,000 inspections over the course of the year. At this speed, the universe of licensed units would take more than 10 years to inspect. That is why targeting inspections with the algorithm is so important. The current version of the algorithm incorporates information like the age of the building or the time since it was last fully renovated, when DOB last inspected and the results of that inspection, and information about ownership structure. The algorithm is also important for another reason: fairness. When the proactive program was started by DCRA in 2009, it was conducted by random selection of licensed properties. However, property owners wanted to feel like their practices and the specific condition of their buildings helped control whether and when they were inspected. By using data about past inspection outcomes, since 2018, the algorithm puts some of the power in property owners' hands. When a property is identified for inspection, DOB gives the property owner and management company 60 days to prepare. This allows DOB to prepare as well by posting information about the upcoming inspection on our website and physically notifying the tenants on location. DOB solicits and collects tenant consent forms for each unit to be inspected to preserve the tenant's right to autonomy over their homes. DOB's goal is to achieve 100% coverage of units in the building. While this doesn't always happen, especially with large buildings, aggregate coverage routinely exceeds 50%, giving a good picture about the state of the property. At the scheduled time, DOB sends an inspector to perform all the inspections scheduled. Based on our experience, DOB has discovered that it is quicker to send only one or at most two inspectors and have them work the building until complete, as opposed to trying to do an entire building in one day with a larger team. At the end of the proactive inspection, any violations found are converted into infractions and served on the property owner, similar to what happens with a complaint-based inspection. However, DOB has another program in place that works hand in hand to deal with larger properties and larger number of outstanding violations, the Alternative Resolution Team, or ART. ART is a program that accelerates abatement of violations and relieves congestion in the district's administrative court. ART is a small but mighty team of 5 that works to settle and dismiss fines outside the courtroom if abatement of violations is confirmed. They are highly successful, resolving an average of about 200 cases per week. By comparison, a team of 7 agency attorneys, as well as multiple administrative law judges and support staff, can still only take 50 or so cases to trial each week. ART has been critical for reducing DOB's queue of cases for adjudication. In addition, ART is empowered to consider all the facts and circumstances to arrive at a fair outcome for tenants and property owners. They are uniquely situated to consider complex issues like tenant interference, hardship due to fire or illness, or other personal issues. To further streamline the alternative resolution process, DOB has 2 other powerful tools worth mentioning. First, we disclose all open housing violations on our public dashboard located at dob.dc.gov. This landlord violations tool allows any property owner to search their address or name and find every item that DOB expects to be corrected and every outstanding fine. The property owner can then submit electronic abatement evidence using a special portal that is reviewed by expert inspectors. Where that evidence shows violations are clearly abated, the case is referred to ART. If there is any question about the electronic evidence or an in-person reinspection is scheduled, then an in-person reinspection is scheduled, and only after that confirms abatement is the case referred to ART. Using these tools, DOB confirmed abatement of 35,399 violations in fiscal year 24, of which 32,646 were housing code violations. The proactive inspections program specifically contributed to 7,767 violations abated, a confirmed abatement percentage of 67.62%. This was one of the highest rates in the agency. You can find these and other interesting statistics in DOB's fiscal year 24 enforcement report, which is located on the enforcement action page on dob.dc.gov. In conclusion, proactive housing inspections have been a key part of the district's toolkit to help maintain our stock of multifamily housing and make sure tenants are receiving the conditions required by law. As an early adopter of this relatively novel approach, the District of Columbia and Mayor Bowser's administration are pleased to offer any assistance and information we can provide to Philadelphia and other sister cities interested in charting this course. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parsons. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to share about the work in DC. It's certainly impressive. Please do hang on for questions at the conclusion of the panel. Will the clerk please call the remaining witnesses for this panel?
Oh, that was it for the virtual, and we'll move on to the in-person.
Can we call panel 1 or 1.5?
Sure. We're going to go to Commissioner Bridget Collins-Greenwald and Rachel Mulberry.
Good morning, Commissioner. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
No, I'm good, thank you. Sorry. Good morning, Chairs Gauthier and Driscoll and members of the Housing, Neighborhood Development and the Homeless and the Licenses and Inspection Committees. My name is Bridget Collins-Greenwald, and I serve as the Commissioner of License and Inspection on the Quality of Life side. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today on resolution number 240267, introduced by council members O'Rourke and Landau, which authorizes these joint committees on housing, neighborhood development, and the homeless, and license and inspections to hold public hearings to examine the conditions of rental housing, rental code enforcement, and the need for rental repairs throughout the city of Philadelphia. The safety and well-being of Philadelphia residents is our highest priority. Housing is not just a fundamental necessity, it is the foundation of public health, economic stability, and community well-being. Yet, as this resolution underscores, some Philadelphians are living in rental units that are not in compliance with the Philadelphia codes, which can pose serious concerns for their health and safety. The mission of Quality of Life is to responsibly and respectfully serve the community of Philadelphia by providing quality code, education, and enforcement services. We are transparent, we are approachable, and we embrace positivity to make the city the safest, cleanest, and greenest large city in the country with economic opportunity for all. Education and enforcement of the property maintenance code is part of that larger mission. Currently, our enforcement efforts are complaint-driven, meaning an inspection is triggered by a complaint that we receive from the public. When we respond to complaints, our goal is to achieve compliance without displacing residents unless absolutely necessary. However, this is not always possible. The goal is to take a more proactive role in the rental property inspection process. We welcome the opportunity to collaborate with City Council. Expanding the department's authority to take stronger enforcement action against repeat offenders would deter negligent landlord behavior, allowing us to create better accountability in the rental market. At the same time, we recognize that enforcement should not place undue burdens on the responsible small landlords who are committed to maintaining safe housing. In conclusion, our agency supports efforts to enhance rental code enforcement and improve housing conditions across Philadelphia. Every resident deserves a safe and healthy home. We look forward to working with City Council, landlords, tenants, and the community stakeholders to develop practical solutions that protect renters while fostering a fair and accountable rental market. I welcome any questions you may have, or turn it over to
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Mulberry, Chairs Gauthier and Driscoll, and members of the Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless and Licenses Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify this morning. As I mentioned, my name is Rachel Mulberry, and I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, or PHDC, here to testify on Resolution 240267. In my role, I manage both home repair and rental assistance programs, so I'm familiar with how closely tied together housing affordability and housing quality are. Today, I'd like to share some background and early successes from PHDC's Rental Improvement Fund. The Rental Improvement Fund is the city's most recent and largest attempt to support Philadelphia's small landlords to make needed repairs and improvements. We generally define a small landlord, sometimes referred to as a mom and pop landlord, as someone who owns no more than 5 rental properties or 15 units. RAF is funded by the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative and makes forgivable loans of up to $25,000 per property to small landlords in exchange for a 10-year commitment to keeping their rents affordable. We do this work because we believe that quality shouldn't be sacrificed for affordability, nor affordability for quality. Since launching in summer 2023, the Rental Improvement Fund has closed 324 loans and invested $8.2 million in repairs. For comparison, RAF makes about as many loans on an annual basis as all private banks make to small-scale and rental investors for home improvement in Philadelphia, according to Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data from 2022 and 2023. In order to achieve this kind of reach and scale, we have built a program that meets these landlords where they are. We know that landlords often need support in making the kinds of repairs that will enable them to get a rental license or better property insurance policy, which is why we don't require rental license or full insurance policy upfront from landlords who can't get them. Our inspectors do a full property walkthrough to help landlords develop a scope of work that addresses health and safety issues at a reasonable cost. We're especially focused on the types of repairs and improvements that will have the biggest impact on tenant health and well-being, including energy bills that so many households in Philly struggle to afford. Some of the most common repairs we've seen so far are the essential ones: roofing, electrical upgrades, plumbing, and HVAC. We also see plenty of requests for new flooring, kitchen, and bathroom upgrades, which we are happy to approve since we believe tenants in affordable units deserve updated amenities too. As the program has grown, we've developed more rigorous practices for guiding landlords through the building code and zoning requirements so that repairs are completed with the right level of oversight from our partners at the Department of Licenses and Inspections. We know that with the resources we have been given comes the responsibility to help shift some of the culture around small-scale construction in Philly. That's why we insist on detailed scopes of work, using licensed contractors, and proper permitting. RAF is a high-touch program, but we know that there are so many benefits to bringing current practices in line with city rules. Our team can handle upwards of 50 applications a month, with our current capacity, and we have a structure that can scale. That's all thanks to PHDC's in-house team of unionized loan processors and inspectors and knowledgeable program leadership. To support applicants, we have weekly information sessions, a real-time application status page, and a phone hotline staffed 5 days a week. And we're always exploring new and revised loan products to better meet the need, including one we plan to launch soon that will finance more expensive repair work at unoccupied rental properties and encourage more energy efficiency improvements. The Rental Improvement Fund is viable thanks to cross-agency partnership and open lines of communication. One of the many ways that we partner is around applicant referrals. For example, the Eviction Diversion Program refers landlords to RAF when repair issues come up during mediation, and the Philadelphia Housing Authority refers landlords who fail their inspections. We also have great relationships at L&I, Revenue, Commerce, Health, and Homeless Services. Lastly, we are lucky to have the support from expert researchers on the Health Department's Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention team, who are leading an evaluation of RAF's impact in collaboration with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia and the Housing Initiative at Penn. That evaluation is positioning us to better understand impacts to tenant health and well-being, as well as the ways our assistance helps small landlords stay financially stable. Building and growing the Rental Improvement Fund over the last years has truly been a team effort, and I look forward to discussing the ways it can continue to serve the city's goals to improve both rental housing quality and affordability in the years to come. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's great work. Thank you so much for speaking about it this morning. I think I inadvertently squished two of our panels. So right now, we're going to take a regional approach, and we're going to ask questions of our partners in DC and the administration at the same time. I would like to start with a question for Mr. Parsons. I'm sorry if I missed this in the testimony, but can you speak about when DC started its program and about the cost, the budget cost?
Yes, certainly. So the first version of the program dates all the way back to 2009. the version that works mostly the way I was describing is more from 2018. Let me see. I don't have my budget numbers on hand, but it's primarily supported by about $300,000 in contract support and an additional perhaps 6 FTEs. So it's not a super expensive program. It's not even the majority of the housing program if we're just talking about proactive inspections.
Thank you so much. If you are able, and if you get clearance from, the powers that be in DC, it would be great if you could share with us some detailed cost information. We're in budget, and so we have a desire to do this, but it's also timely for us, and we would love to look at those numbers if you're able.
Yeah, I will at least look at the, we have public budget numbers, and I will put Councilmember O'Rourke's staff in touch with those links so you guys can review those.
Thank you. Question for the commissioner before we open up to other members. I know that you have been thinking about this issue because we've talked about it offline. Can you talk about how you're thinking about approaching it and what some of the obstacles have been?
So you may remember when I came in here last year when I first started in this position last May, I guess it was, we talked about doing proactive rental inspections. I met with Councilman O'Rourke's staff several times, Kate and his team, which have been awesome. Met with Renters Unite, and we thought, what are good ways we can come about going about this? We thought we could hit the ground running with virtual inspections as a good start. It's given us, we've had some hiccups along the way. I can safely say now that we are starting that program. We are doing a small pilot. We think that is going to take some of the burden off of physically going out to a place and actually inspecting it, but ensuring that there's still safety involved. So that is one idea that we've had. We have talked about, so what we have done as a whole in the Department of L&I QOL since the split was we completely restructured. So the way it was set up before the Mayor Parker split is what I'm talking about, how there's 2 parts of L&I now, the quality of life and then the inspection, safety, and compliance. What we did on our end, on the code enforcement end, was we have now dedicated teams that do business education and enforcement, fire inspections, nuisance property, we have a nuisance property unit and a property maintenance unit and a vacant property unit. So all those were kind of all consolidated before. So it wasn't allowing us to get to really the heart of the matter in any of them because our inspectors were really spaced out. And I will say this from an inspector standpoint, when they would get a fire inspection complaint versus like say a vacant property complaint or maybe a business zoning complaint, they always went with fire, which I totally get because it's a safety thing. By splitting those units up, it's actually allowing our property maintenance unit to actually focus on housing. So that's rental, these rental landlord tenant issues that we're seeing. So I think that is a very proactive, good step that started at the end of the summer. So I think we're seeing benefits from that already. Hitting all the properties that are out there as rental properties. To put in perspective, at this moment, we have 810,000 active rental licenses. So I just wanted to put that number out there for, just for information for everyone.
Thank you so much. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Mark Squilla. Chair Driscoll, do you have any?
Commissioner, do we have any sense of how many properties are renting without a rental license?
So we have estimates. We have an estimate that we think there are about between 250 and 310,000 rental properties. So without a license, we're not really sure. I mean, there have been estimates thrown around by different agencies. We are working with Q right now to actually kind of hone in on that to see where we're at. We're not there yet, but just to kind of get us better numbers from what we have right now.
And how do you typically, how's it reported to you? Does it come through the council's offices? that you have somebody in the neighborhood that is operating illegally?
So 311 and council offices, so probably everyone here has probably gotten in touch with our office to tell us about a rental property in their district. 311 is still the way we're receiving them now. Until we get into this more proactive phase that I'm talking about, we're handling things through 311 and through council offices.
Okay. Because I'm very concerned. I think the number's high.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Minority Whip, Councilmember O'Rourke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you to Mr. Parsons, Ms. Griswold, and also to Ms. Mulberry. I appreciate you all for your testimony today. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Parsons. You stated that your proactive team of 9 inspectors is able to conduct more than 16,000 proactive inspections over the course of a year, and you use your algorithm to target the buildings that are most likely in need of inspection. Can you share anything else about how comprehensive this inspection coverage is?
Certainly. So the way it works is that if the algorithm targets a building, then it gets put on the 60-day timeline that I described. So we post it on the website. We let the owner and management company know that they are on the list and we're showing up about 2 months later. Then we go and we prepare and attempt to inspect every unit and the common areas of the building. So we will sort of do the background work to try to inspect the entire building. And we will also solicit both through the management company and through posting the building, the express consent of each of the occupants of the units to let us in and let us do the inspection. The actual penetration of the building depends on how many people say yes, because we're not at this point using any sort of legal authority to force an inspection if someone does not consent to it in this context. But we're trying to inspect basically the entire building every time, and depending on the building and what the folks who live in it want, we tend to get more or less.
And using your algorithm approach, is this team of 9 sufficient to cover the roughly 190,000 rental households in DC? Or is there an ideal amount of inspectors that you don't yet have resources for?
Well, that depends, Councilmember, entirely on the speed that you want to get through it. Right now, we do, as I said, we can cycle through over a number of years. There is a bill that's unfunded right now that would make that cycle 6 years for all buildings. And the reason it's unfunded is because we would need more team members and, to make that timetable.
You said a 6-year cycle at the current state? Okay. Can you?
Well, 6-year cycle is the standard in the bill that's been passed by our council, but not yet funded. So I would need more team members to go that fast.
Understood. More in order to get it quicker. Okay. Can you explain more about how the alternative resolution team is so effective at resolving violations? What kinds of actions are they taking to do this work so effectively?
Well, the first thing that is really effective is that we have plugged them in at the end of this abatement confirmation process. So a while ago, we redid our data so that we were tracking not just at a complaint level what's happening, but at the individual violation level. So the inspector goes out and every single thing that's broken gets noted in the data. And also we can track when it is fixed. The alternative resolution team is sent every case once those things are fixed, which gives them a big baseline of cases to work with. In addition, we have been and have found a lot of success with doing outreach. We've been analyzing our data and we will notice a owner or a property that has a lot of outstanding violations. The alternative resolution team or others on our team will call them up and be like, do you know that you have 200 violations that the Department of Buildings wants repaired? And, sometimes we get a lot of response, but ultimately, when we start talking to people about this, they want to come into compliance. And so that's another channel where we refer them to the alternative resolution team. When people talk to us, solutions happen.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. I just stay in our kind of truncated panel. I want to jump to you, Ms. Mulberry, if you don't mind. I think I heard you say that the Rental Improvement Fund makes about as many loans as all private banks make to small rental investors. That's correct?
On an annual basis, that's more or less correct, yes.
That is amazing. Can you talk more about the scalability and the impact of the Rental Improvement Fund? I know a lot of us are concerned about how stricter enforcement will impact small landlords, but this program seems to be doing an amazing job at addressing those concerns.
I think one of the real strengths that we've found is by building the infrastructure in-house. It allows us to be really flexible, so we have our own team of inspectors, our own team of loan processors. We have attorneys that have helped us tweak again and again our mortgage and note. So as we better understand with time what extra levels of support landlords need or what issues we're running into during construction or during that affordability compliance period, we're able to change our processes, tweak them, make them more effective. And then the thing that becomes scalable is that we can do that with more staff for more landlords. As I mentioned, it will continue to be a high-touch program because we want to make sure that that both landlords and tenants are having a good experience. But by hiring more loan processors, more management, and more inspectors, we could absolutely increase the volume above what we're doing now.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwald, do you have data on the annual number of cease operations orders that lead to orders to vacate?
We do. We have numbers on the number of properties that we've ceased, businesses and residential properties. We don't keep track of where, if anyone is displaced. That's not something that we keep track of in our data.
Is it possible to keep track of it, or where might we find information like that?
I would have to get back to you on that. I'm not actually sure how we would do that. Since we do code enforcement, I'm not sure the next steps of if it goes. I mean, when we vacate a residential property, OSH is involved with us, so I would assume they would probably have those numbers, but I don't want to speak for them, so I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay, very good. All in all, I want to thank you again for your presentations and your testimony today, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, and I want to acknowledge the presence of Council President Kenyatta Johnson, who I know cares a lot about this issue. Thank you for stepping in. Councilmember Phillips.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just want to pose just a few questions to L&I in regards to the presentation from DC. Now that you've heard this presentation from Washington, D.C., and hopefully, the further conversations could be sparked as a result, is your department now thinking, are you beginning to think of more of the possibility of a proactive approach to license and inspections for rental properties?
So we have been talking through what it would look like to have a proactive approach. As I said, we restructured the department, and when we came in, what we did was we have business, we have fire, and we have property maintenance. So we have established proactive fire inspections. So we do these auto repair shops that have been popping up. The council president is shaking his head all over the city. They've been very successful. We've met with each individual district council person and done these corridor proactive inspections. These are proactive inspection programs that we have started. The next on our list is proactive rental inspection. So talking to the gentleman from DC would be, yes, absolutely helpful. As I did state, I might have mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned it really quickly, we are working with Pew to establish some best practices that can be implemented here. So I'm sure we'll be in touch with our colleague from DC.
Yeah, you asked that question because I know in your testimony you mentioned that we are still taking complaints from the public, and if they complain, you make it a priority to go out and do the inspection. The only issue is that there are some very vengeful landlords in our city, and a lot of folks are afraid to make those complaints. And so unfortunately, that model no longer works in our city. And we have to, I just want to add that, if your team can provide additional, information on what funding or resources would be needed to expand that in our city, I would be so happy to work with Councilmember O'Rourke and Landau, and of course the housing chairwoman Gaudier, to make sure that we see fit to make this happen, because it's clearly a significant problem. And I mean, if there's already a model that's being done, we can at least start there in our city. And then also the last two questions. Are there protections in place to ensure tenants can report violations without fear and retaliation? And what penalties exist for landlords who fail to comply with the property maintenance code? And are they sufficient to deter future violations?
So any complaint put in is anonymous, so we would never talk to the landlord. So anyone's protection is, anyone's protected that calls and puts a complaint in, no matter what it's for, through the 311 system and through your office, right? So their identity is protected. As for what happens when we do an inspection, we do very similar to what Washington, D.C. does. We go out, we inspect, if there are violations, we issue those violations, we issue them to the property owner. We give them a certain amount of period to comply. So after that period, we go back out and we re-inspect. Depending what the issue is, some landlords come into compliance and then we just close the case. Some do not, we send them to court. Some are egregious enough that we would do an intent to cease, which would give you a little bit more time for a landlord to fix. And if you do not, then we would do a complete cease. As we stated earlier, we hate to do something like that because it does displace people.
Yeah, that's really important. And also, just as you know, it's not technically anonymous in our city, only because landlords know that if someone's coming out, someone told on them. And the only person that possibly got told on them was the resident. And so, yeah, I think we need to really immediately work on changing that. And this is also just my last comment, is that, are we, with our city's enforcement, I know you don't know all the little landlords that exist in our city. You have an approximate number, but I think this is also an opportunity to do something. I'm not sure how DC does it. You could talk about that, but there's community members. I live on a block, and I can tell you how many people rent, on my block. If we can do a publicity to kind of understand, to let community members know, please let us know, who are all the renters, work with the neighbors, work with the community organizations, and that way people who are not reporting that they're renting can be identified as, these are rental properties. So I think a community grassroots effort, as well as publicity stunts, can help us identify all the renters in the city. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Vice Chair Landau.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all three of you. I had an order, but I'm going to go a little out of my order in which I wanted to go in so I can respond to my colleagues' questions about what happens next after inspections. As we know, in Philadelphia, we have a fair housing ordinance that is enforced by the Fair Housing Commission, which makes retaliation against a tenant illegal. So that if L&I does come out to inspect or is notified about a property, the tenant is technically protected under the law and should file a complaint with the Fair Housing Commission. And this is important to note, that it's whether the tenant called L&I and issued the complaint, or whether another neighbor does. The landlord doesn't need to know who filed the complaint or who called L&I on the property, but that the tenant would be protected. First question for Commissioner Greenwald is, does L&I inform tenants of a property when there's been a complaint filed against the landlord with L&I? Sorry, let me finish this again, let me try this again. Does L&I inform tenants in a property of the existence of the Fair Housing Commission and their rights to file a complaint to protect themselves from retaliation when L&I cites a property?
Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to confirm it, definitely. It should be on the notice of violation, so it's on there. So do our inspectors actively tell them? No. I'm sure we could. That seems like a very simple change in process, but it is on the violation.
A lot of times, the violations are coming to the property in the landlord's name, and the tenants won't open the violations.
I hear you. Gotcha. I'm totally following, yep. That seems like a very simple process, tweak on our end.
If L&I could even hand out a flyer and leave it on the table that day that says, we were here, just so you know, your rights are protected, I'd be super happy to help you create that flyer with the law department as well. Thank you. I want to go back to our friend from DC. Thank you so much for being here, because I wanted to set the stage with some of this first. Mr. Parsons, can you tell us what your program looked like before you made this change? I'm curious if it was similar to Philadelphia. Also, do you have a checklist of what you're looking for when you do your proactive inspections? Is it a short list of your larger code, your health and housing code, or is it the full code? And also, do you have in general what your greatest findings are of the repair problems in properties?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So in the furthest back before times, the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs was fully complaint-based. And so that would be just, waiting and someone would reach out with a housing complaint and we would respond and inspect. That program still exists, and it's a little more than, in the most recent year, a little more than a third of our volume. The proactive program did sort of get started at a small scale in 2009 and has built up to the point where it is today, where it's close to a third of the volume, a little bit less. And the other program, the BBL program, which is for the 1 and 2 family properties, I don't know for sure when that started. I don't have that information with me, but that is now also between 25 and 30% of the inspections we do. That one has the BBL has an explicit physical checklist that I think is on our website and available of the things that the inspector's looking for, that is somewhat more limited than the general complaint-based code inspections. The proactive doesn't have a physical list like that, but the team does concentrate on things like, are there smoke detectors, and is the egress in the building working correctly, right? Like, they're focusing on the life safety issues in the building and making sure that everything is working on a larger scale. They are not as focused during the proactive process on, chipped paint or the like. That's going to be more of a complaint-based issue because, at that point, there's the complainant who is saying, I specifically told my landlord to fix this chipped paint and they haven't done it for 2 weeks or whatnot. Did I cover the whole question? You had a couple of things there.
Just in general, or is there a theme of your findings? Have you found similar poor conditions or necessary repairs throughout?
Well, I think the theme, I would say, is that the proactive program does work in the sense that it identifies violations, and when they are abated, they do not then have to be reabated by complaint. We do have, if you go check out our dashboard, if you wanted to, you could pull down all of the open violation data into a spreadsheet and play around with it to see what exactly we're finding. We do analyses of those items all the time. I don't have anything fun about that with me today, but that is something that we do for sure.
Thank you so much. That was super helpful. Commissioner Greenwald, I, for over the years, have noticed one place where we're failing in Philadelphia, which it sounds like DC is doing well, and it's really good communication between LNI and the landlords. I've always watched the code enforcement court just being a place where landlords are kind of checking in, saying, oh, I've just learned of these repairs, I've got to go out and fix them, and that if we could do more proactive work, knocking on the door, calling the landlord, finding the landlord, saying, hey, just so you know, we just have 5 violations on your property, we want you to fix them, we're here for you, there's PHDC right there, can give you a loan, any kind of that communication that is not what landlords and tenants are both fearing, are retaliation or punishment. If we could avoid the retaliation and punishment, I think that would be a step in the right direction here. A lot of landlords really are worried about, what's going to happen when I'm found out that I have all of these problems here. They probably are very untrustworthy of that the government will come in and help them to fix this. And I think some of this really is marketing and communication. What brings me to you, Director Mulberry, is you're touching, first of all, thank you for stepping in the shoes of the small banks that should be lending to our landlords anyway. Thank you very, very much. This is exactly what Philadelphia should do. The government should step in and say, if you guys aren't going to do this, we're going to take care of this. And I love that there's a program to help landlords make repairs on their properties. But I do know there's a lot of landlords who are scared to say, my place is in poor condition. When you come in here, you're going to know that I have a problem. How do you handle that when talking to the landlords to make them feel comfortable that you just want to be on their team and work on their side?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that, again, we have very close relationships with LNI, but that this program is housed at PHDC, which is a separate agency. We have a separate set of inspectors. And so we can go out as a kind of impartial body, and our inspectors are really knowledgeable and can provide advice. A lot of times we come across and work with landlords who know the property has issues, but they aren't engineers or architects or contractors themselves. And so it's really our inspectors who can help them understand what needs to be done. And then I'll reiterate the point that I made earlier, which is we try and set a really low bar to entry. So again, we know that many folks, when they come in the door, are renting to tenants and don't have a rental license. We've all read that, the same reports. And so we are happy to work with them, knowing that by the time the repairs are complete, they absolutely do need to have that rental license in place. Same goes for property insurance coverage. So we try and set that bar really low, build that trust, have a single loan processor assigned who can kind of work them through the process, and then make sure that by the time we're signing off, doing our final inspection, making our final payment, everything is where it should be. And then because we have this the loan is forgiven over 10 years, we're checking back in every year to make sure, to look at the leases, make sure they still have property insurance coverage, check whether there's new code violations, make sure they still have a rental license, to make sure that because of this financial commitment we're making, that those properties stay in good condition and following city regulations during the life of that loan.
Thank you. One last question, Commissioner Greenwald, is about tech. We know that Eclipse took a long time to get started, and then after it had been, we've been using it for a while, many of us believe we need to move on. Is LNI staying with Eclipse? Are there any updates happening to it, and how do we enhance the technology?
So we are in the process of actually enhancing Eclipse right as we speak. So hopefully, October of 2025 is when you should be seeing, so we're calling it Web UI, so it's more interactive, it's web-based. You'll be able to navigate it more easily. I know, I think the first modules that were put together in Eclipse are a little clunky, and I get why. It was the beginning of the implementation. So what we're doing now is going back and looking at those business modules, the license module, how you go in as the everyday citizen going in that doesn't use Eclipse as much. So I think you're gonna see many improvements there. I also think it's gonna be more intuitive to use, and there will be a whole communication plan around that, like, hey, this is what you can do now in Eclipse. So yes, we're in the process of enhancing as we speak.
Thank you all so much.
Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson.
I said two questions. Thank you so much, Madam Commissioner, and to all of you who have testified, and particularly the testimony we heard from Washington, D.C. I thought that was particularly helpful. I have just two quick questions. Have you all seen any correlations between multiple outstanding violations and property tax delinquency? And is there any correlation between revenue and LNI that allows for data sharing?
So to the first question, I do not know the answer to that. So I could get you that information to see if there's any correlation between code. I would have to talk to revenue to see how we could get that. So to that one, I don't know. The second one, do we correlate with revenue? Yes, we do. So actually, we're working on this process right now that I think everyone's going to be, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, but I think there's going to be some good things coming where we're going to see some good who has a license for what and how it corresponds to revenue, and it'll bring actually some people up to light that don't, and then some people that do will actually probably bring some more revenue into the city as well. So it should be a good thing.
Right, and I asked because, and I'll ask a second part to the question, but I asked because I'll call myself an accidental landlord after my parents passed away and left us with a house. And typically when you have a rental property or rental unit, you have to file through the tax center to file all your tax information. And to me, that would be an indicator from a revenue perspective what information should be on file for you at LNI. With all your proper licensing and, even with health, with your lead paint test and all of those different certifications you need in order to even process the rental license under the city's website. So I wanted to ask that question. And then back to the multiple outstanding violations and the property tax delinquency, sometimes there are property violations, even if they're exterior, as an example, that could be an indicator for other things that are happening from a code violation perspective with the property overall. So I wasn't sure if you all were doing that. And then finally, I have to mention this relative to utilities. Is there any way that you all work with the utility companies as an indicator to figure out which properties are actually rental units?
We're actually working with the utility companies right now. We're actually starting something where we're going to be sharing data, so I think that's going to be really helpful.
Okay, because that could be a definite indicator. Obviously, it's not helpful doing it with water, right? But doing it with an outside utility company and then making a comparison with the data that we have from a city perspective could help us to aggregate out that 250 to 310 number to get a better picture of where we are. And then finally, Are you all working with or intending to work with an organization like Pew to help us get a better understanding or idea of where we are? I know they were exceedingly helpful when we worked on and continue to work on the Tangle title issue in producing a report with a lot of research, a lot of data sharing that sort of helped us lay the roadmap for how we are continuing to deal with Tangle titles. So are you all planning to do that as it relates to this issue?
We are indeed. We actually just started a relationship with Pew. We put in a concept and they accepted it.
Wow.
So actually, yeah, we're just starting. So we're really excited about that. So we should be getting some good information really soon. So actually we're really excited to be starting that relationship, so.
Okay, that'll be awesome. And then finally, I have several additional questions that I'm just going to submit for the record for your written response, okay? But I wanted to make sure, that the inspectors that are actually on site, that they have the language services available to interact with the constituents, because that is another barrier that we're facing. So just even from an education perspective with the inspectors, as far as interacting with, the residents, is that something that you all work on or have?
We're working on that now. A lot of our materials are in multiple languages. All of our business materials are in, I think, every language that we think we've captured everyone in the city speaks. So our business languages are like that. We are actually we have multiple languages in some of our violation notices. We've also been working with, is Google Translate the way to go when we're on scene? You know what I mean? Or if that's something we can do, it actually works well. So,
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we're getting there with those types of interpretations.
Is there like a pamphlet or a paper or something you can give out that has the translation already on the document when the inspectors go out?
Yeah,
on
so that,
site?
yes, yep,
Okay.
so yes, we're working on that. We've completed all the ones on the business end for business corridors. We're working on now all the ones on the property end. So we have them in several languages, but not all.
Okay, and then I'm sure we can share them in like the utility bill notices and the notices that go out from the city as well, particularly when they're first released and when they're initially finished. I think that would be helpful, and then of course sharing it with us, and we can get the information out with tabling and other events. We can share that information as well. Okay? All right, thank you.
Can I make a plug for something really quick?
Yes.
So on our website, and this might be something that you may want to tout, and I always call it the wrong name, so let me make sure I call it the right one. The Partners for Good Housing, it's on our website.
Yes.
Everyone's familiar with it. It's excellent. It has a lot of information. That is in multiple languages too, but it is a really well put together document. Oh, everyone's shaking their head. So good, everyone's familiar with it.
I'm shaking my head because you have to give out the Partners for Good Housing if you have a rental license.
Yes, you do.
Every tenant has,
Yes.
you have to have that.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that is absolutely written in the code,
Yes.
but I mean, just for you, as council members too, to just be able to share it with your staff, because I find it, or your constituents, not your staff, and your staff, but I just find it an excellent document.
And I just want to thank you as a sidebar for the work that you all have been doing on the commercial corridor project. I know we met about that recently and sort of doing the proactive inspections relative to a lot of these drug paraphernalia stores that are also causing many issues in our community. So I want to thank you for that, and I look forward to the proactive work that you all will do on the residential side as well. Thank you.
Remember to thank our friends.
Thank you so much. Question for you, Commissioner. I know that you're thinking about a proactive rental inspection pilot. I know that's connected to the relationship with Pew, but I want to know, what can you tell us about how you're thinking about a pilot, and what is, just an estimated timeline?
So my estimated timeline and working with them is we just finalized some documentation. It's like a 15-week process, so I say give or two. What's 15 weeks? I would say with four months around. I would say just based on, getting started and whatnot. Do I have some ideas? I have some ideas from what I've heard from fellow colleagues, but I actually would like to just do a deeper dive into them before I would make a recommendation like publicly or how we're going to change some processes.
Okay, got it. But 15 weeks, so like 3-4 months, we should be expecting to hear more from you on what this could look like in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think we'll get some information together and then we'll work with the mayor's office and the managing director's office and our partners at PHDC to actually get something, some good recommendations together. And hopefully some are just like a process fix. And then some will probably be a little bit larger, I imagine. But so hopefully there's some low-hanging fruit, and then more of the how do we get into this whole program and make it a systemic, programmed proactive inspection program.
Great. All right, I think Minority Whip O'Rourke has questions. I think Chair Driscoll, and then we're going to try to wrap up this regional panel. Go ahead, Minority Whip.
It was just a quick one, and I thank you again, Mr. Parsons, for explaining what's going on in the city. Commissioner, they have a 9-person team. Curious to know how much money it would cost to hire a 10-inspector proactive inspection pilot team. If you can give a rough estimate while we're in budget season, that's good.
So I was doing the numbers when Mr. Parsons was talking. If he has a team of 9 that gets to $16,000 a year, if I heard that correctly, right? Did I hear that correct? Yeah. Okay, he's shaking his head, yes. So they do 7 a day. They do about 7 a day if you account for the work day, right? So we came up with a number. If we were to do all of them, okay, if we did all, say we just go on the low end of the 250,000, right? 250,000 rental properties, and we wanted to do 10 inspections a day, right? We would need 110 inspectors to do that if we did it on an annual basis. So that would include, that's cars, that's space, that's an astronomical number. That's about $6.2 million annually, plus all that other stuff that I just said. So what we would have to do, I believe, is stagger it the way they do. They do it on a 6-year cycle, it sounded, so it would have to be something like that. This is off the top of my head. I don't know if that's where we're going, but I think that would have to make sense just because of the way the numbers pan out.
You said 6.2 annually?
That's if we did, the 250,000 rental units that we think we have, right? And then the number of inspectors we would need to do 10 inspections a day would get you around 110 inspectors. That's times like 60,000. This is just basic back of the envelope math. Okay. That's an annual cost, plus the cost of vehicles and space and equipment and all the other things you need. So this is just very back of the envelope. Sure. So that's why I don't know where that would take us. How many? Would that be annual? Would it be every 4 years? Would it be every 5? It sounded like in DC they started off smaller and then they got there, which is exactly what I believe we would do. Start off on a pilot and then grow into that to make it scalable. So Rachel's point of how they did their program.
Thank you for obliging me, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that math. And I just want to say, obviously, budgets are about priorities, but $6.2 million is not astronomical. But
there was a caveat that there were a lot of other costs
I agree with starting off with a pilot and growing from there. Yeah. Chair Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, do you know the aggregate number of non-compliant landlords that get referred to court?
That are referred to court? I could get that. I do not have that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And if you could break it down, and this may be a big ask, but if you could break it down by councilmatic district?
I think we could.
Because we're thinking of a rapid response unit, a pilot program, but your information would be very valuable to us. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to try to wrap this panel. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists with a special thanks to Mr. Parsons. It has been invaluable to have you here sharing the work in Washington, D.C. And it sounds like our commissioner and many other folks want to continue to talk to you so that we can implement something similar. So thank you so much for your help. And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Director, for being here today. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the next panel to testify?
Sherry Thomas, Catherine Nelson, Daisy Cruz.
Good morning. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Resolution 240267. I'm Sherry Thomas. I'm an attorney and a director of Housing and Habitability Initiative at Legal Clinic for the Disabled. LCD is a direct legal services agency. We serve low-income individuals living with physical and mental health disabilities, and we are a partner in the Philadelphia Eviction Prevention Project. Thank you for recognizing that these issues of rental housing conditions, rental code enforcement, and the need for rental repairs throughout Philadelphia is important to the health and safety of our people. These issues in particular are a pain point for renters and tenant advocates because it is one area of the law with the least effective legal remedies that actually don't protect the renter, and in fact can serve to put the renter at a high risk of an eviction filing. When a renter experiences safety and habitability issues in their home, they have few legal options to address the issue if their landlord is not responsive. They can choose to repair the issue themselves and deduct from their rent. They can choose to withhold their rent to incentivize their landlord to make the repairs, or they can choose to vacate the property. At any point, they can also call license and inspection. Out of these options, we see most renters decide to withhold their rent in order to incentivize their landlord. Repairing and deducting is often not a good option, especially for low-income renters, because they cannot put the money up front to make major repairs. And vacating the property is also not really feasible for most because they have either just spent a ton of money just to get into the property with deposits and moving costs. And we also know that there's a lack of enough affordable rental properties and penalties for early lease termination, so it's not really feasible. However, withholding rent and calling L&I is still very risky, and for some people, not possible. So I represent people with disabilities. Many of them are on SSI. SSI recipients in particular cannot hold more than $2,000 in their bank accounts without putting their SSI payment at risk. So they cannot withhold to incentivize their landlord because the remedy is just doesn't realistically exist for them. For others, even though the law recognizes withholding rent as a valid way to incentivize a landlord to make repairs, it does not prevent a landlord from filing an eviction against them for unpaid rent. I do appreciate Councilmember Landau's remarks about the Fair Housing Commission, and I appreciate them and acknowledge them. However, some renters don't know that that's an option, and if the landlord gets to court first and files against them, then it is no longer an option. They lose jurisdiction. So once a case is actually filed, a tenant has no choice but to deal with it. And that means they are either defending themselves in court, they're defending themselves when it was the landlord who actually committed the first wrong, or they need to reach an agreement with their landlord who is already hostile to them because they've filed these complaints. So in both scenarios, a very real outcome is an eviction. I'll give you an example. One LCD client withheld her rent for several months due to significant plumbing issues in her home. Her landlord took her to court for the sole reason of not paying her rent. She lived there for almost 15 years, and despite having saved the money, she withheld the money, and she agreed to pay the landlord back in an amount that was found to be fair by the judge, her landlord still insisted on moving forward with the eviction. In that case, the judge did allow it, and she was ordered evicted out of her home. That tenant followed the law to the letter as it exists in Philadelphia, and it failed to protect her from eviction. Another LCD client experienced flooding, including sewage, after her landlord failed to properly address plumbing issues. She called L&I. L&I came out, they issued numerous violations, and they indeed found the property unfit for habitation. However, at the time of trial, the violations were open for more than 4 months, and the landlord's rental license was still active. The law currently does not let a judge evict a tenant if a rental license does not exist or if it's inactive. And they also don't let a judge award any money for back rent if that's the case. However, in this case, despite the property having violations that were open for 4 months and the property was deemed unfit, the active license allowed the judge to still award the landlord money and grant the eviction. At trial, she was found liable for the back rent and she was found evicted. If a tenant can't take the risk of going in front of the judge, which sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, they will need to make a binding agreement with their landlord to resolve the case. In my experience, and I think a lot of tenant advocates would say the same, most landlords will never agree to make repairs a part of that agreement. So this puts tenants in the position of either making agreements to stay in the property with no promises of repairs, or agreeing to move out of the property on a timeline that the landlord has to agree to. This was the exact situation faced by another LCD client. She has a number of disabilities, including spinal cord injury, several mental health diagnoses, and an autoimmune disorder. She lived in a subsidized unit, but with significant repair issues, including mold, flooding, leaks, and periods of no heat. However, because she was on a fixed income because of her disability, she couldn't take the risk of possibly losing her subsidized unit by taking her case to trial, as happened in my earlier examples. Her landlord also would not sign any agreements that included repairs. So she was faced with possibly becoming homeless and losing her subsidized unit in front of a judge. So she signed an agreement that allowed her to stay in the home while making ongoing rent payments, plus a small amount towards her arrears. After the case was over, her landlord still refused to repair the issues, and she continued to live with mold, clogged sinks, broken lights, and problems with her electrical sockets. At that point, she decided to withhold her arrears while still paying her ongoing rent. However, her landlord took her back to court because she was now in breach of her agreement. And there, a judge found that she should still be evicted because she withheld money under the agreement. And in the end, she lost her subsidy and she was evicted. Habitability issues are also really challenging to present in court once you get to that point, because sometimes they just don't photograph well. For example, how do you adequately show that there's no heat in your property, that there's no hot water, that mold is affecting your breathing every day? How do you show a judge the experience of not knowing if your toilet is going to flush every time you use it, that your electricity is going out, it's spoiling your insulin and the food that you just bought? How can you show that your floors are warping, making it harder or impossible to get around your unit with a walker? These are just a few examples of the conditions that renters have come to us with. Sometimes a tenant's testimony can be supported, though, with L&I reports. But what you need is a judge to accept those things into evidence. So again, there's another obstacle. We check Atlas, which is the city's website, for L&I reports, but those reports are not always uploaded there. If those reports are not available, then we will go there in person to L&I to try to get the reports. However, we're often rebuffed because as attorneys, we are not the property owners, so they will not release those to us. Another option is to subpoena an L&I inspector to come to court and testify. But in municipal court, where most evictions cases are filed and tenants are sometimes representing themselves, subpoenaing an L&I inspector is an additional hurdle to prove their case in front of a judge. The bottom line is, once a complaining tenant gets to court, they're already finding themselves at a disadvantage. They've already gotten through all of they're experiencing the retaliation in real time. The current law that we have and the remedies that we have, they all really fall short in adequately protecting renters, and they are some of the most vulnerable in our population. Renters are in a situation where exercising their rights may directly result in an eviction. And many people continue to pay rent while living in unsafe conditions because the risk of complaining is just way too high. Philadelphia has made great progress in recognizing that housing is a human right and that keeping people in safe and affordable housing is a priority. We fully support this joint committee conducting these hearings and taking action. Unresponsive landlords can act with impunity if they're not held accountable by the current system. While tenants can try to exercise their rights, they still stand to lose more by complaining than their landlord stands to lose by not being responsive. And Councilmember O'Rourke mentioned earlier the power dynamic. It's a very real and unbalanced power dynamic, and we're working towards making it more balanced, but it still remains imbalanced. It is crucial for our city to invest further into L&I and take other measures to keep landlords accountable, ideally before we get to the actual court filing and the eviction process. That is absolutely crucial. Investment is essential to protect vulnerable Philadelphians. Thank you, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for your great work at LCD. I saw our L&I staff react when you mentioned that you couldn't find the reports online. I'm assuming that that's something they're going to want to connect with you on offline. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, good morning. Actually, we may be at noon. Good afternoon. Are we close? We're still morning. Good morning. I want to start by thanking Council Members Gautier and Driscoll for chairing these committees and for holding these hearings today. And thank you to everyone on Council for being here and for your time and attention. I'm Dr. Catherine Nelson. I am the Assistant Director for Housing at the Center for Law, Inequality, and Metropolitan Equity, or CLIME, based out of Rutgers Law School. I'm also a almost now 20-year resident of Philadelphia, and so I've spent most of that time researching and thinking about housing and affordability here in Philadelphia, and I'm drawing directly on that research in my comments here today. I'm here to testify about the state of rental housing conditions in our city and to ask you to take urgent action to proactively address worsening conditions for the safety and well-being of our residents. Philadelphia is blessed with a large but old housing stock. The median age of a home in Philadelphia is 75 years. So that means half of the buildings in this city are more than 75 years old, half are newer. Older housing creates challenges, which we've talked about today and which I'll get to in a moment, but I want to start with this. Older housing is naturally occurring affordable housing. The concept of filtering is one of the oldest and most widely accepted concepts of housing economics. And it's this, essentially, right? When homes are brand new, they command the highest prices and the highest rents. As they age and they deteriorate over time, they become more affordable as they get older. And therefore, in a healthy housing market, older buildings serve a crucial role housing lower income populations. In Philadelphia, the median affordable home is about 33 years older than a more expensive home. So while we're focused today on the challenges of the city's housing quality, I ask you to also think about home repair and proactive rental enforcement as something that not just brings challenge, but also brings opportunity for creating greater affordability in our city. Our ability to leverage our housing stock of older homes for our lower income residents requires that aging buildings receive necessary maintenance and upgrades. Here's what we know. Roughly 41% of Philadelphia renters live in homes that are in need of repairs. The repairs vary in scale and cost, but the average is roughly $3,000 per housing unit. Poor housing conditions include leaks, exposed electrical systems, insufficient heating and cooling systems, lead paint, mold, asbestos, and pest infestations. And these substandard housing conditions are linked to a wide range of serious health concerns. This means poor rental housing is a public health problem. Health conditions include respiratory infections, asthma, lead poisoning, and physical injuries. We've heard directly from several, I think, eloquent voices telling the stories of real people to this effect. Water leaks lead to mold growth. This affects respiratory health. This can lead to asthma, to coughing, to wheezing. Cold indoor conditions are associated with higher blood pressure, respiratory conditions, and depression. Substandard housing also is related to mental health, contributing to depression, anxiety, and chronic stress. And concentrations of substandard housing, meaning substandard housing units concentrated in a particular block or a particular neighborhood, have been associated with higher rates of homicide and suicide at the community level. These health dangers impact everyone, but children, seniors, and those with disabilities are particularly vulnerable, as we just heard from Sherry Thomas, right? Seniors are more likely to experience life-altering accidents from falls. Children are particularly prone to developing chronic conditions. More than 40% of the risk of childhood asthma is attributable to exposure in the home. And here in Philly, 1 in 5 children has asthma, which is more than double the national rate. The need for repairs is not born equally. Low-income renters are most likely to live in homes with habitability issues. 3 out of 5 low-income renter households with repair needs are headed by single women. Almost half are households with children. The importance of responding to this connection is acute in Philadelphia. We are a high-poverty city with poor health outcomes. We have lower life expectancy and higher infant mortality than the national average. So, what can we do about this? The Federal Reserve estimates that the cost to repair all rental units in the Philadelphia area is about $900 million. We're never going to repair this all at once, but we are in a moment where the mayor is introducing an $800 million housing investment that, if we are strategic and smart about, could potentially put a large dent in that dollar figure. 2 other promising options, which we've already heard a lot about today, and which I encourage us to think about collectively, are 1, proactive inspections, and 2, home repair programs working with and targeted to landlords. We just heard very eloquently from Ms. Mulberry about the incredible rental improvement fund here in Philadelphia that sounds very promising and scalable. So I'll focus the remainder of my comments on proactive inspection, which, as we've heard today, means inspecting units periodically and cycling through every unit in the city every certain number of years. Philadelphia currently relies on a complaint-driven system, meaning only those units where a complaint is lodged directly by a tenant or a neighbor is inspected. Complaint-driven systems are much less effective than proactive systems at inducing regular upkeep. Since landlords know everything is complaint-driven, tenants are often afraid to report habitability issues for fear of landlord reprisal and eviction, as we have heard today. Very often, housing conditions, therefore, seriously deteriorate before the complaints are made. And this leads to more costly repairs, it leads to more of our units becoming uninhabitable, and it makes it harder for the city to understand the true magnitude of the repair problem and respond accordingly. Philadelphia has just 19 housing inspectors for the whole city, and with such limited resources, it is almost certainly impossible to cycle through all the rental units in the city on a regular basis. But even a targeted, proactive approach could be very impactful. Inspectors could target particular landlords with a history of repairs, target particular parts of the city with concentrated repair needs, and some portion of funds might go towards relocation funding for displaced tenants while more serious repairs are required or when buildings are condemned. With my ending comments, I just want to remind the city about our landmark home repair program for low-income homeowners, the Basic Systems Home Repair Program, or BSRP. It's been around for 20 years, it's among the oldest in the country, and it is absolutely a national model that cities all over the country are looking at. We've just heard our Rental Improvement Fund is maybe on the way to doing something similar for renters. And I encourage you to take seriously today's challenge to protect the health and safety of our vulnerable Philadelphia renters by thinking about how we can intentionally and proactively shift to proactive inspections as a central plank in our response to the need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony and your work. Ms. Cruz, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon now.
Please state your name for the record and
Sure.
proceed with your testimony.
My name is Daisy Cruz, and I'm the district leader for SEIU 32BJ, the Mid-Atlantic 1201 District. We represent over 10,000 members who work and live in Philadelphia. We represent a wide range of workers, from janitors to security officers, airport workers, bus drivers, bus aides, and building and maintenance engineers. For many of them, being in a union has allowed them to have stable long-term incomes. Many of our members have been able to purchase homes or secure stable housing. However, the relentless rise in the living costs has made the dream of home ownership increasingly elusive for many. We often hear stories from our members who are forced to now rent, unable to afford a home of their own. We believe that it should be a privilege to live in Philadelphia that only the wealthy can afford. Our members are the heart and soul of the city, and as they work to keep it clean, running, and safe, they deserve the chance to live in a city that they care deeply about and not have to completely break their bank to do so. People used to be able to afford reasonable spaces in reasonable neighborhoods, but they aren't affordable anymore. People used to be able to afford their own apartments, now have to have multiple roommates or rent rooms in houses where they are sharing common areas with strangers. Regrettably, the lack of better housing options has left our members vulnerable to exploitation by untrustworthy landlords who take advantage of their desperate need for shelter. Many small and pop owners are doing their best to recover from the economic effects of the pandemic. Those landlords are dealing with the struggles of regular folks and are often willing to work with their tenants. The bigger issue tends to be from larger companies that increase rents whenever possible, threaten evictions, and often let critical repairs go neglected for long periods of time. Rental issues are quality of life issues. Housing instability is a significant hurdle to the physical and mental well-being of our community's residents. We've heard stories from new members trying to make it through probationary periods while in between housing, to more tenured members who fall on hard times and struggle to maintain their employment while facing evictions. The instability makes already difficult situations all the more challenging. We're not a housing or rental organization, AID, but we clearly care deeply about our members, the stability of our members. We fight constantly to improve the quality of life in and around the city of Philadelphia, and we want nothing more to see improvements in the state of the rental market in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for everything that your members do to keep this city moving. I want to talk more with the administration about this, but I know that they're working with Pew, they're putting their pilot together. But I also wanted to ask you all about the issue of displacement. We know that increased inspections will likely lead to more housing being declared unlivable, leaving the occupants with potentially nowhere to live. I heard you talk about this briefly, but I wanted to know if the panelists could expound on possible solutions to displacement resulting from proactive inspections.
So what I suggested in my testimony, and I think this is the best way that I can suggest we think about it, is putting together some sort of a fund for those cases where this happens, where buildings are condemned or where the inspections that are needed require that a tenant vacate. Obviously, this is not a perfect solution, but it is what I can suggest. I guess the point that I want to tack on to that is that proactive inspections are intended to try and help us get at these problems before they deteriorate, right? And so I know this, it doesn't change the fact that yes, and as we switch to proactive inspections, we are very likely going to see some of this, and are going to have to come up with solutions for it. But I think in the broader term, this is the switch that helps us avoid more of the avoid so many of these cases where it becomes deteriorated to the point of uninhabitability. No further.
Ms. Thomas, did you want to add?
I do. So I had a case where this is exactly what happened. A tenant was living in a rooming house. The conditions were deteriorating over time, and over time, many of the other occupants had moved out. The landlord, we took him to court. He said, "I don't have the money to fix any of these things. These problems are really much bigger than I can fix." And the tenant had called L&I, and of course, because of the safety issues, she ended up having to leave. On both sides, it was a money issue, right? There was, on the landlord side, I don't have enough to deal with this large problem, which may have been a small problem that just wasn't dealt with in the first place. And on the tenant side, she was on a fixed income. She was using all of her available funds to make up for not having electricity, for not having running water. And that was, a true tragedy in the modern world. We live in a city. No one should not be living with no electricity and no running water. But she had used up all of her money to do that. So when it came time to move, she didn't have any funding. And we had to cobble together funds for her, right? And there just wasn't a good solution for this person, and it was a financial issue, and so that's all I want to add.
So potentially having a displacement fund for tenants, but also maybe marrying the rental improvement fund to these inspections, right? So that we can help at least the small landlords to carry out repairs. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Vice Chair Landau?
Yeah, thank you. I too was curious about any ideas you have in all of our legal systems that are not working and what can be fixed. But I want to pose one in particular. Many, many years ago, the city of Philadelphia would affirmatively go out and fix very dangerous problems of landlords and then charge the landlord. We've been talking about that a lot now, and it seems that the city and other entities, no one really wants to take responsibility for that repair anymore. So my entire boiler is broken, there's no heat. It wasn't too long ago that the city would send out repair people fix that, get you a new heater, and then just send a bill to a landlord and go collect on it. Now they don't want to do that repair issue. Are there any thoughts that you have on that? And also, especially if you have research that you've done in other areas of where that works, because I see the fund we're talking about to also have this emergency repair arm to it, so we can take care of the biggest safety and health issues immediately.
I mean, if we can do it, we should do it. Right. I mean, we've now heard from multiple panelists about loans that are available and different financial options. I think one of the things that we see with our population is this, it's a lack of accountability, or like just being able to move forward with impunity, you know? And so I do think that if that is an option, we can do that, along with connecting people to the correct resources. It can't just exist in a vacuum. The resources have to be available, and people need to know about them in order to take advantage of them.
Did anybody else want to? I think the silence means they want us to figure that out.
Right.
But did anybody else want to weigh in
I do
on
have a
that?
comment. We had a member who, I can't remember exactly how the whole situation was. You know, we're not a rental aid, right? We're not, but our members come to us for about looking for resources, and we try to like point them in every direction that we can. But I remember specifically there was a plumbing issue, I guess in the city, on their sidewalk or whatever. Of course, they were not the owner, but I guess which I was not aware until this whole situation happened, that the city of Philadelphia, I guess the water department, has some type of program that the landlord was able to apply and then get some type of I don't know if it was a low interest or no interest loan to get the repairs done, and that's how the member was able to get those repairs done, but the landlord had to apply through it was either no interest or low interest for I don't know how, it was a year, 3 years. But the repairs got done, right? There was a serious plumbing issue in her home, and it was connecting, of course. But she wasn't responsible for it, the landlord was. So that was something that we learned about it, of course. That's something that we can share with other people. But having those type of programs, I hear what you're saying, the city of Philadelphia doesn't want to be responsible, but having those resources or those small loans or easy loans that landlords could actually get.
Point of information, Councilmember Jones actually did create a law for emergency repairs, but I believe the issue is funding it, right? Making sure that there's funding for that program, and also making sure that it lives in the right department. Those are things that still need to be figured out, but things that we should work on.
Can I, just to throw out, one more thing. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak directly to it, but to that piece. But, we heard that the Public Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data shows not very many loans happening for small landlords. And I have looked at this data a bit, enough to see that denial rates are sky high. Right? And I hesitate to throw a number out because it's been too long, but I want to say more than 50% are denied. And so I think that is something to look at. Why are these denials happening? It has something to do with the underwriting and the crediting. So I think it's about, having conversations with our local banks and our local financial companies around what are strategies that we can use to make these loans more readily accessible and available.
One more question for Sherry Thomas, Legal Clinic for the Disabled. When L&I comes out to a unit where there's somebody with a disability who lives there, say it's a physical disability where there's a ramp out front, and that ramp is in disrepair or broken, is there a place on L&I's code enforcement where they can specifically comment and delineate that there's a broken ramp where it wouldn't be for most of the properties throughout Philadelphia, but in this specific property there is?
I have not seen it. I can't say for sure that that doesn't exist in the code enforcement, but it's not a code violation that I've seen specific to disability.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Judge Samantha Williams, somewhere in this room. No wave high. Who is also my sister and worked on a lot of these issues as a staffer in City Council. Chair Driscoll.
And Daisy, thank you for your advocacy. Catherine, the same. Sherry, just to get back to that case you were talking about, when the landlord doesn't have the ability to fix, does their rental license get revoked by the court, or does that go back to L&I for the action?
That would be an L&I action. What we could do in court are things like injunctions, right, where we'll file a lawsuit trying to implore the landlord, basically get a judge's order to tell the landlord to fix something. In this particular case, we didn't find out the landlord was in financial need until we actually got to the court case and he was questioned by the judge. Yeah, so that would be an L&I action. There is something in the code right now that says if there's a violation that is threatening the safety and habitability of the renter, if that violation stays open for more than 30 days, we can ask the court to invalidate the license. But that leaves it pretty much up to the judge, right? It's discretionary, and depending on who's on the bench, you just don't know how that outcome will be. So what I would like to see is that there would be like a proactive invalidation or a pulling of licenses for specific violations, right? If something's found to be hazardous, unsafe, unfit, then that license should be at risk, right? And instead of getting to the point where you're in court and now the tenant is on their back foot trying to defend, and it's kind of a lottery. You just don't know how the court will actually enforce that provision in that law.
Well, I think during this budget process, we need to talk to L&I about making that a policy. Mm-hmm. So thank you for highlighting that.
Councilmember O'Rourke.
Thank you, Member Landau. Just on that point around the displacement fund, our team is actually actively working on legislation related to that, and the idea being recouping the costs from the violating landlords with penalties, liens, what have you. And we welcome any support on that matter too, because we do want to address that piece and recognizing that this effort to try to proactively address this could also cause displacement. I think they ought to be the ones to pay for it. That having been said though, Ms. Thomas, can you clarify the law around withholding escrow process for us? As a tenant, when do you have to escrow and when do you not?
Okay, so the law around this, it's not statutory, it's case law in Pennsylvania, which basically means that there was a case several decades ago and now the court is bound by that law. So the process is a tenant can withhold their rent, it is their legal right. They should notify their landlord that they're intending to do that. Well, first they should notify their landlord about the repairs, give them a reasonable amount of time to make the repair. The law does not define what reasonable is, so it does depend on probably the severity of the violation. So if it's the dead of winter and I have no heat, right, a reasonable time to repair that should be immediately, right? So depending on that, so you want to notify your landlord first that there is a repair outstanding, give them reasonable time to repair, and then you withhold your rent. The law actually does not require that it be in an escrow account specifically. I know that some banks do not have escrow accounts that their customers can open, but what it does require is that you set that aside so that when you come into court and a judge asks you, where's the money that you've withheld? Because I think the court does not want it to become an excuse for just not paying rent, right? So they want to see that you've actually withheld that money, and that if the court decides, okay, you don't owe 100% of your rent, but you owe 50% of your rent, you are then supposed to have the ability to pay that 50% and then avoid the eviction. That's not how it always plays out. And what we often find is that folks who are dealing with really severe habitability issues, they'll start withholding their rent, but then they need to use some of that money to buy heaters, blankets, water. There's so many things that people do to make the place habitable because their landlord isn't fixing it. And all of those things cost money. So you're not always walking into court with 100% of your money. And again, depending on the judge, right, if you're short, that can be a point against you. If you don't have the money withheld, then that's also a point against you, right? So the more we can do to prevent people from getting to that point, we should. It's the withholding rent, it's a longstanding law in Pennsylvania, but the way it plays out doesn't sufficiently protect renters because they're still at a very high risk of ending up losing their home. And sometimes that money also goes away if the conditions are so unbearable that they've now spent it to move out. But their landlord is still asking for the rent that they weren't paying while they were still there. So you walk into court, you've now used all of your money that you withheld to move out to a safer property, but then legally, your landlord is still asking you for the back rent.
Seems really complicated.
Yeah, it's...
What critical information for your work is not available on Atlas? As far as I understand, we have some Atlas experts here today who are working hard on updates. We'd love to help inform their work with your tenants' experiences. So if you could share what it is that's not there so we can help inform that would be super helpful.
So there are reports available on Atlas. So when you pull up Atlas, it will first take you to a screen where it will show you what parts of the code the violations exist in. If you click on that, you can see the code itself. If there's a report, the report will tell you what fines the landlord has actually been fined by L&I, and also details about what unit in the building the violations were found in. I was referring to that those reports are not always there for every address. So we have found that over the past 1, 2, 3 years, a lot of those reports are showing up, but they're not showing up for some of the older violations. And so in that case, we'll try to go in person to L&I and try to pick those up.
But the reports are currently sufficient. There's nothing missing there that needs to be added in.
If the reports are there, yes.
Okay.
So it's the thing I was referring to that is missing is sometimes the report itself isn't there. But if the report is there, it has the information that we need that we can then, submit into evidence.
Okay. And this is for everybody on the panel. Good to see you, Daisy, by the way. Listens to you. I'm very interested in government transparency and accountability. I would that we would all be interested in those things. What would you all recommend that we change or update about our public and accessible data to support tenants and the work that you all are doing? You can take a couple seconds to process that for a minute.
While they're processing, I'll put out there, I think, a problem that is known, which is that the use of LLCs and other names in place of actual human who control rental companies and who are landlords. Now, the city, I know in 2018, 2019, passed a law that required that business licenses have the actual name of a human being connected to it. But if you go and you, for example, want to learn about who owns a unit in, say, the rental license directory or something like that, you do not necessarily have the human name present there. And the amount of work that it takes to then figure out, okay, that unit is connected to this LLC, and then I go to this database and I figure out this LLC is, it's too many steps removed As someone who does a lot of data work, it's a lot of work for me, much, much, much too much for a normal human. So figuring out how to make the ownership information more readily accessible to tenants would be high on my list.
Yes, I will second that. One of the things that we need to, one of the ways we try to hold landlords accountable is by filing lawsuits. And if we don't have good information about where to serve that lawsuit and where to find that landlord, then the case is dead before it even starts. And a lot of tenants do come in and they'll say, I don't know who I'm paying my rent to. I now have to pay rent into a portal. The portal isn't updated. I don't have a ledger that I can look at. And we'll ask them, okay, we want to contact your landlord. Well, I text some guy. I don't know who that is. The ownership switched at some point, and I'm not sure who I'm paying my money to. So it's a lot of work. I appreciate it's a lot of work for you, and it's a lot of work for us to try to figure some of that out.
It's a lot of work for us, too, to try to find these people. Were you going to add anything? Okay.
I think for us, and I would just say, did Lance leave me? No, he's still here. But it's just, if I think about it, it's like just having easier access, just information. Like I joked with you this morning that I heard on the news about 988. I had never heard about it. I mean, we're here all the time. We're working with, with city council all the time, but it's just like, just putting things out, easier access, but also just promoting a lot of things that people just don't know about.
Councilmember,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Phillips.
Hi, I just have 3 quick questions. Thank you all for your testimony and availability for this very important discussion. This is for Sherry Thomas. Should Philadelphia consider third-party inspections or require landlords to submit evidence of repairs before an eviction judgment is issued? Because I know you talked about things don't photo well. So I'm just thinking about that as a solution.
Yeah, I think the more information that a judge can have to make a decision, the better. I think the problem with the photographing and habitability issues is that sometimes will come down to credibility, right? If the tenant doesn't have pictures and reports and inspections, then it turns into a he said, she said, we're weighing, and that could be very subjective.
Yeah, and if they just took photos of the repairs themselves and proved it, or receipts showing, that would be helpful. And then also, Dr. Nelson, you mentioned that 41% of Philly renters live in homes needing repairs. Do we have data on how many of those repairs have been successfully completed through existing enforcement mechanisms?
Not that I know of, no. Those are estimates that were used, or that were created essentially using public data and some proprietary data about cost, but there's no information there about the number of repairs that have been made, unfortunately. Having said that, the Federal Reserve Bank that did the original estimates is, as I understand it, working on a report right now that updates them.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that Philadelphia has 19 housing inspectors.
Yes.
What would be a realistic staffing level from your standpoint to implement a meaningful proactive inspection program?
I say this with a little bit of hesitancy because I've only sort of looked at comparison cities, but in listening to the gentleman from DC today, it sounded like they were about 40, which is about twice the number here. That would be the ballpark that I would start with, although I'm happy to think more seriously about that and give you a more detailed response.
Well, again, thank you all so much for your testimonies today, and I believe our council is going to really work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your testimony and for your very important work. We appreciate you. Will the clerk please call the next panel of witnesses to testify?
Tyrese Rogers, Janet White, Shamar Pitts, Teresa Howell.
Probably, let me check. Yeah. Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Whomever wants to go first.
Hello, my name is Janet White. I am a member of Philly Thrive and a resident of District 8, and I'm also a former nurse in home health aide. I live at Magnolia Mews in Germantown. I moved in an apartment in 2018. Over the past 7 years, I have experienced multiple instances of poor maintenance and unsafe conditions. When I keep my glasses on, I'm sorry. When I moved in, there were cracks in the windowsill. These cracks let in ants and cockroaches. I even had rodents running around the apartment. I also had water damage, both in the ceilings and in the floors. My bathroom ceiling had a hole in it because of leaking water, and my floors are warped because of water damage from below. I even had holes in some of my walls. Now, throughout the past 7 years, despite this unlivable conditions, I continued to pay my rent on time and put in maintenance and requests after maintenance requests. Finally, after not having heat for an entire winter, I was fed up. After 4 years of living like this in 2021, I called L&I. Next thing you know, an eviction process was started against me as retaliation. In 2022, one day I came back to my house and I was locked out. I was evicted, and me, my mom, and my granddaughter, we were all displaced. I had to stay with one of my sisters and was couch surfing. My 84-year-old mom had to stay with another one of my sisters. And and my granddaughter, she was 21. And at that time, she has long struggle with like mental health challenges. And being displaced was very hard for her. Since she didn't want to stay anywhere else besides her own home, she was sleeping in parks. And I was afraid she might be sex trafficked and everything, man. I was scared. Oh, God. She eventually ended up in incarceration instead of being able to sleep in her own home. All because I stood up for myself and called L&I to hold my landlord accountable. My family suffered significant mental and emotional effects in not having a safe home and resulting in retaliation. And in 2023, my eviction proceeding went to court. And with the help of Philly Thrive and CLS, we won. I was able to go back in my apartment, and L&I came to make an inspection. It took 2 years. 2 years. An eviction for L&I to come to my apartment to hold my corporate landlord accountable. That's not right. When L&I finally came, they cited my landlord with 10, not one, but 10 violations. My landlord did fix some of them, including the heat, but however, over a year, and I'm still there. Yes, I'm still there. And my landlord still hasn't fixed every violation he's supposed to fix, or she's supposed to fix, or whoever the people is. And L&I has not followed up. They ain't come back yet. I'm still waiting. We need more funding for L&I rental inspectors to hold corporate landlords accountable. My family suffered from terrible conditions and displacement. It should not take 2 years in an eviction proceeding for L&I to do their job. We need more rental inspectors, and not only that, L&I should inspect rental units before people move in so that these issues can be prevented. I hope that this city council will act in support, but thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, and I hope that you will do the right thing and support low-income renters.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that you and your family had that experience, but I'm happy that you were victorious. You know, it's our job to make sure that that never happens to another tenant. So thank you so much. Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Tyrese Rogers, and thank you all for letting us testify. Thank you. I'm a member of, well, like I said, my name is Tyrese Rogers. I live in Lawndale, and I'm one of the fortunate members of 1PA Renters United. I don't have the issues that a lot of other people have. I've become their spokesperson. So anyway, I don't have the best looking common areas, thanks to some of the people that live there, not a landlord issue. And I have a slight mouse problem. Like I said, I can't say the same thing for those that are in my group. For all those who do not know, without LNI inspecting our apartments and homes, a grave housing safety crisis has become a part of our city. However, due to work or illness, some people that I'm going to speak on, just a few, are not here, so I will briefly address some of their issues, such as turning my few mice into a full-grown infestation of roaches that Lori, a fine speaker who cannot be here today, keeps complaining about. But she still has the same situation after repeatedly talking to her landowner about this again and again and again. So, like I said, I'm so glad that when I moved back into Philadelphia, I was still apart, but now I have my own place. I did not move into an Odin property, and their properties are over most of Philadelphia. Hey, let's talk about having outdoor rodents, so like squirrels and raccoons, inviting themselves into your dwelling just because they can. Another one of our members who was out here maybe a few weeks ago, Eden, reported this to her landlord, but she only heard the sound of laughter instead of anything to remedy her situation. And then during the heart of winter, she called LNI about not having any heat, only to be told that no one could come out. Perhaps we should speak about mold and mildew, or that are in some of the Odin properties, I had to say their name again, that are all over our city. Some of these situations are so severe that one of my acquaintances living in one of these dwellings has developed a respiratory issue, to say the least. Another one of our members, Ida, which is why I changed my speech just a little bit, she complained about not having any hot water running in her unit from 7 a.m. to from 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. She had no warning about this either. That blatant disregard for how people live their lives, that does not sound like a reason to increase any rent. So, unless you live in an industrial-style apartment, no one wants to see pipes on an exposed ceiling. But some do get to view that because their ceilings have collapsed. Keep in mind, all do not possess the income necessary to move into a better residence. And without proper inspection, starting before you move in there, people will be here with the same issues. Everybody does not make that median income, which I've heard about over and over, to try to make a better condition for themselves. Why is it that our city's L&I fails to hold landlords accountable? In the middle of winter, why can't they respond to heat being shut off for hundreds of Philadelphians? Others are here with discrepancies with their living situation, so what's wrong with proactive inspections? Let's nip this in the bud before it starts. This brings us to our collective issue of wanting $10 million to be added to LNI's budget for proactive inspections. Look at the room here. Well, there's not that many people, but no one here expects to live in such conditions. Nobody. So, wouldn't it be great for Philadelphia if there was an LNI that actually worked for its citizens? Okay. Good. And as the speaker for my group, one PA, Renters United, and Philly Thrive even, these are all my people, I will continue to speak on their situation so that they can have at least a safe, healthy home such as I have. Not the best place, but it's livable.
Thank you so much. Are you
Okay.
done your testimony?
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a little bit more.
Okay, go
I'll be
ahead.
out here.
You got it.
We are thankful to all you council members who are here with us today, and we implore you to support safe, healthy housing for all. Okay, and I thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much. You're a great spokesperson. And I also wanted to say, obviously Renters United is a very strong advocacy organization, but while we work on this proactive rental inspection program, if you all have open items for LNI from your members, feel free to submit them to the committee because we will help you press on those issues and get responses.
Thank you.
Mr. Pitts, good to see you.
Yes, good morning.
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Shamar Pitts, and I'm the co-managing director at Philly Thrive and a lifelong resident of District 2. And before I was at Philly Thrive, I had multitudes of jobs, right? I always had a job, and one of my jobs, I worked with a contractor as an apprentice. Carpentry apprentice, right? And the name of our company was First Class Renovations. And he used to work me hard, right? But we used to go from a gut out to a showroom finish. And Miss Janet, right here sitting next to me, one of the many low-income people from our community that I know and that experience unsafe and unhealthy rental conditions, which is just a shame. And I also know Miss Janet's sister. And we know that this past summer, this was one of the hottest summers that we've had in a long time. And I just remember her sister living in an apartment that was without electricity during those hot summer months, right? And that was just terrible. And then I have another friend of mine whose name is Maria. She's also here in attendance. She was out of hot water for so long, it's a shame. She's been out without hot water for over a year and a half. And, these landlords are not held accountable for these things, but guess what? They want their money. They want their money. You better have it. That's what they want. They want their money. And I also know of a young lady from our community. Her name is Rashida, and she couldn't be here today because she has a small newborn. And in the house that she lives in right now, she has electrical fire hazards. And when she reported this to LNI, the landlord retaliated and wanted to get her evicted because of the electrical problems that's in the property that she owns. She wanted her to be evicted. Her children are not even able to take a bath in the house because the tub is broken. Unsafe rental conditions, especially for low-income renters, are widespread and a major problem throughout our city. But me being a contractor or working for a contractor before, I know there's a different way, and there's a different way possible because I've seen it. My sister, who is a small landlord, she owns 2 properties. She's a responsible landlord and wants her tenants to live in healthy conditions. So since I used to work with this contractor, she hired us to work on one of her properties. She purchased it, and we started working on it, and we were going to make this compliant for Section 8. We wanted to help low-income renters, so we made sure that we was going to be compliant so that a Section 8 person will be able to move into this home. And so we renovated, we put in a new kitchen, a new bathroom, we put in new windows. There was a lot of water damage and things to be done to the house because the person that was living there before, under the landlord they were living under, it wasn't repaired. So it was a lot of repairs that had to be done, and we did the repairs. And L&I came out and they inspected and they made sure that every outlet was grounded and they made sure there were no leaks and they made sure everything was proper. And I just remember the person that moved in, when I talked to her, she said, I was online looking for a house and I saw this house. I was getting ready to call your phone 3 o'clock in the morning when I saw this house because I just want to move so bad, right? And I was just so happy for her that she was moving into, a nice home that was done with love and care. And so L&I came out and they made sure that this was properly done. She was just so excited when she moved in that it was just a joyous occasion. And this is a success story of what proactive rental inspections from L&I should look like for every person in this city, in any house that they live in any apartment that they live in. But as we heard from my fellow panelists and the people who have been up here, we know that that's not what's happening. Low-income tenants have nowhere to turn for support and are forced into unlivable conditions because they can't afford anywhere else. Whereas small landlords who need financial support to make repairs, they have places like the Rental Improvement Fund for support. And even though that needs to be, fixed too, because that has problems also. But low-income renters don't even have that to even look out for, right? They don't even have that. They don't have many options for affordable units in the city as it stands anyway, right? It's unlikely that you're going to end up in my sister's property, right? Because she only owned 2 properties, so it's only 2, right? Now, you could end up in her property by chance, maybe, right? Or end up in a corporate landlord building where the profiting and making needed repairs is not on the list. They just out for profit, and no one is holding them accountable. And safe and healthy housing should be a guarantee for everyone, not based on your income or by chance. This is something that is allowed to happen when we can do something about it. We shouldn't allow these things to take place. It's well within our ability to correct it. And not only that, Philadelphia is behind the other major cities, as we seen the brother come on from D.C. and talk about their program. They light years ahead of us in Philadelphia, right? And they have programs that have proactive inspections. And it's a no-brainer and a way to ensure that low-income renters are protected and that they have a safe and healthy home. And we need our city to invest in this proactive rental inspections so that every rental unit has a thorough inspection, especially at a time when our federal government is getting rid of protections. We are turning to our city council to stand up for us, and I urge the committee to support a pilot proactive rental inspection program, and thank you so much for allowing me to testify. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work and your advocacy. And if Philly Thrives has recommendations for the rental improvement fund, you can feel free to submit that to the committee, and we'll take that into consideration as we talk about the ongoing life of the program. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. And good afternoon.
My name is Teresa Howe, and I first want to thank all the councilwomen and the councilmen that are here listening that care about what renters go through in the city of Philadelphia. So firstly, we want to thank you. My name is Teresa Howe, and I'm a proud member of 1PA's Renters United of Philadelphia. I'm a renter and a lifelong Philadelphian. I have lived in my current residence for 13 years. I love my community and my neighborhood. I have built long-lasting friendships, relationships in my community. We look out for one another. We watch out for each other's children. Even when we go on vacation, we keep each other's animals. That's just how close we are in that community. However, I am being pushed out of my home for many reasons. My home was built in the 1930s, and it has not been updated in almost 100 years, except for the kitchen, which I fought and I advocated for, and through organizing with 1PA's Renters United, I got a brand new kitchen. I have been plagued with the need for so many repairs over the years. Each time the landlord, Drew DeMarco, sent someone to make repairs, it was only a patch job. It's a battle to get repairs for the property from the property manager, and I've been battling for 11 years. Recently, I learned my home has an unsafe amount of lead, and a child in my care contracted lead poisoning from this home. But I was given a lead-safe certificate. Drew DeMarco owns over 500 properties in the city of Philadelphia. So it makes me wonder, did he use his own inspectors to cheat with other homes and lead tests as he did mine? Because clearly he cheated with my home. Bada Environmental came out to do, after we realized this child had lead, Bada Environmental came out and did a lead test, and it was vastly different from the lead test that Drew DeMarco turned into the city of Philadelphia. Vastly different. Oh, and more importantly, do we have the administration that cares enough for the parents and children living in these homes to find out whether these landlords are cheating on these tests? It's not just lead tests. We don't even have a precedent for mold in this city. And children are dying from asthma attacks left and right from the mold content that's in their homes. During my time organizing, I have discovered so many renters are having the same or worse issues than I have. I've had people say to me, why not just move? My answer to that is, it is not that we want to live in horrible conditions, but many of us are unable to have a plethora, we don't have a plethora of opportunities or options. The affordable options that we're usually left with are the predatory property owners that do minimal work on their homes and move us into unsafe conditions. They're only in it to make the most profit with minimal repairs. So I ask a question, I have a question to ask. Since my options are limited, and so many other Philadelphian options are limited because we're on fixed incomes, does that mean that we are entitled to less than people with higher incomes? Do we not deserve safe, healthy homes to raise our children in? Our rent is paid. Our property owners, because we pay our rent, they can afford to send their children to colleges and private schools and things that we afford them to do, and they can't even keep up our properties to keep us healthy and safe. No one wants to move every couple of years because the house is unsafe. People who rent still like building community, which take years. And then because no one makes the property owner keep up the place, we just have to keep moving and moving and moving. Therefore, we can't build community. We can't get to the child that might be in trouble that we can save from going down the wrong path because we have that ability to do so. But because we're not in the community long enough to build anything with these children, because the landlords are so inadequate, this is what we're faced with. So we have more crime in low-income areas because there's nobody there to look out for them because we're too busy trying to stay safe in our homes. You know what I mean? We're trying to keep it where it don't break out in a fire because it's not safe. Or our home isn't flooded with sewage because no one will come with a snake, with a simple snake and just snake the line. Sometimes that's all it takes. But by the time the landlord gets to it, it's at the property line. And now we have a big sewage problem and we have to move. So I'll ask you a question. Since my options are limited and so many other, no, that's not where I'm at. Why should I have to leave? Why shouldn't a property owner be made to make my home adequate? If we had a team of code enforcement inspectors that could go into our homes and do a real inspection, make the property owner repair things properly, then we could stay in our homes and we could build that community or continually build that community. The city gives owners a license to rent, and I need the city to make that license mean something to protect renters. The reactive inspection system that L&I currently has is inadequate. We all know that. We've heard that. We have children dying from mold, children dying in fires unnecessarily, people's health suffering, mine being one. I'm asthmatic, and because I live in a house with lead and mold, I don't need to tell you it's a lot worse. And it's also possibly taking years off of my life. I have grandchildren that I want to see graduate from college. But because I'm living in a home that is inadequate, it probably won't happen if this city doesn't do something to make us important enough to have a healthy, safe home. We cannot afford to wait for the next child to die. We need our city to be proactive in protecting us by inspecting properties before families move in. That's why we're asking for $10 million in the budget for L&I to implement a pilot program, a pilot inspection program. The $10 million is a drop in the bucket, but it also is a good start. The last thing I want to talk about is retaliation. I had an experience of retaliation from my landlord after I started organizing and speaking out publicly. One morning, someone tied a rope from the outside railing of my home to the doorknob of my house, literally locking me in my home. I could not open my front door. Immediately, I started thinking like, oh, they're trying to burn me out and kill me in this house. Because I'm speaking out against what I'm going through with this landlord. Whew, I literally could not open my front door. I can't prove that it was Drew DeMarco. But I'm here to tell you, I live a peaceful life. I'm a person that will help you before I hurt you. Everyone in my community knows me. They knows my name. They knows my children. We are helpful to one another. So I know no one in my community would do this to me. So it wasn't hard for me to figure out where this came from. Whew. He was tired of me talking about him. And I mean, I drug him through the mud. At every chance I got, every time they put a mic in my face, I let everyone know, because I told you he has 500 properties. And most of our members that start coming in originally were from the same landlord, which is mine, Drew DeMarco. But here I sit at this panel, and I'm still talking about it. Because I'm not scared to live in a lead-free home, why should I be scared to speak up about it? So we definitely need legislation to give renters stronger protections against retaliation. Renters should not be afraid to call L&I, afraid of eviction or harassment, just because we're asking for our basic human rights to a safe, healthy home. When we look at renters having problems with predatory property owners, think about your mother, your father, your sisters and brothers. Although they may not be experiencing what we're experiencing, we're somebody's mothers and grandmothers that they revere dearly. So please, help us stop the predatory practices of these corporate property owners and what they are doing to low-income Black and brown communities. We need all of City Council to support the Safe, Healthy Homes platform by giving L&I the resources they need to do proactive inspections. Thank you, council members and panel members, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your testimony and your advocacy and for sharing your story. I have to admit, I was very disturbed to hear about the fake or fraudulent lead certification. I would love to follow up with you after the hearing about that, just to learn more and to see what we can do, to stop that from happening in the city. Minority Whip O'Rourke, did you want to make a comment?
Just briefly, I just want to just thank you all for your testimony. It's particularly important, I think, in these hearings that we prioritize concomitantly alongside the experts in the fields that can give you information on data, the lived experience of those tenants, right? I think you all as renters giving the sorts of testimony like, hey, I experienced a situation where actual lead certification could perhaps be fraudulent or at least biased for the landlord. I think that's particularly important. Politics is about a contest toward resources to kind of work out a common life together. And so this sort of information, I think, is super helpful as we are thinking through how to allocate funding, where money needs to go in order to realize an actual community. Your commentary about this being kind of having to move all the time or being forced to or all that, kind of making community itself unstable or you can't realize it because folks keep moving about. I think that should be heard really clearly, that if we want to have a safer city, it does start with creating spaces where community can stay community. Folks talk often about, what about this generation, that, these kids are doing this, they're doing that, what have you. But you have mothers who are saying, I would love to be a guiding light. I would love to be, to provide some sort of advice or guidance or what have you, but I can't because I can't stay here long enough because of the conditions. Thank you for making that point up. It's super helpful, and I thank you all for what you've shared today. I think this is one of the best things one of the most important things I've heard all week. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
Real quick before you go, I wanted to, first of all, also thank you, and particularly Ms. Howe. I've been saying for years how important it is for tenants to also become the fabric of our communities. Nowadays, people do not stay in properties for 13 years. They're being pushed out and being forced to move in a much shorter period of time. So our goal is to make sure that people can rent and stay in their communities for longer. Our goal is to make sure that you're not being sold something as is or sight unseen, that we really can have people moving into safe and healthy homes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are now going to move into public comment. I believe we have about 10 people on the list for public comment. But before we start, I'm going to ask for your help. Everybody coming up for public comment, you're going to have 2 minutes to summarize your testimony. At the end of 2 minutes, you're going to hear an alarm from our clerk, and then that means, can you please take a few more seconds just to wrap up? Thank you so much. Clerk, will you please call the first person for public comment?
Asantua Nkrumah Turi, Malika Gilpin, and Raymond Hudson.
Good morning. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Asantua Nkrumah Ture. I'm an organizer with the Philadelphia Tenants Union and the Justice for Angel Davis and Latice Bethia Now campaign. Thanks to Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke, his staff, and the entire City Council for this very important hearing. Grassroots housing justice organizations, agency heads, elected officials, etc., must all work together to solve our current housing crisis. First and foremost, we as tenants must organize ourselves to fight back and build our own power. When we vote, we must carefully research candidates to know where they stand on housing issues, being very careful about developers, landlords, and how they make campaign donations. L&I is a very important agency and must be given all the resources necessary to build their capacity, hire more inspectors, and have all the necessary tools to properly do their job to assure the public of safety for housing and other buildings. As a member of the Philadelphia Tenants Union, I sometimes answer hotline calls. Some of those calls include tenants who are concerned about their landlord has never had a license, delay or refusal to make urgent repairs such as mold, cracks in ceiling, etc. Even illegal evictions, and it's often the small landlords, the mom and pop landlords that are the worst in this regard. And if a landlord and tenant have not gone to court, if a judge has not signed off, then that eviction is illegal. Right now, we're facing a tendency among some landlords. They want to threaten tenants with slander, libel, or defamation of their character when they are bad landlords. And that infringement of our First Amendment rights will not be threatened. We are very glad that the former landlord-tenant office of Marissa Shooter no longer exists, and we will make sure it does not come back again. 2 years ago, Angel Davis and Latice Bethia were shot during LTO evictions, and their landlords at that time were the notorious Olden Properties and the Women's Community Revitalization Project, respectively. At the time that Olden Properties had Angel Davis shot, they did not have a license, and both these landlords have a large number of evictions. So I want you to know that joining us today, we have Angel Davis, and she would like to thank you all publicly in her own words. Angel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank everybody.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. Do you think you could start by stating your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Angel Davis. I would like to thank everybody for letting me be here and speak. 2 years ago, I was shot on Olden Properties by my landlord, March 29, 2023. I was shot twice in the head, close range by the LTO. At that time, the LTO office was led by Marissa Shooter and Olden Properties did not have a license as required. This has been a terrible experience for me and my family, but I am thankful to God for my life. I ask to continue for the continued prayers. I ask to continue your support, please, and let's hold bad landlords accountable. Let's make sure what happened to me and Latrice never happens again. That's why I won't stop.
Thank you so much. You are not a stranger to these chambers, and it's just been so inspiring to see how courageous you've been with everything that you've been through, continuing to share your story and adding into all of this advocacy to make sure that people have quality housing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for caring about us and calling us together and hearing our voices. I'm going to have to go fast because I had 3 minutes. But I just,
Please start by stating your name for the record.
Malaika Hart-Gilpin, and I'm with One Art Community Center. And just, you all know this, but there is a plague that's ravaging our beloved city, the same one that ravages the country. Oh, thank you. It's not an illness of the body, but an affliction of greed. It moves swiftly, consuming neighborhoods, displacing families, and seeking to erase the very essence of our communities. Overnight historic homes are reduced to rubble, replaced by towering developments with rental prices so high that the very people who of this city can no longer afford to live here. We're here today to discuss landlord-tenant issues, but these are only the symptoms of a deeper disease: profit over people. Under the guise of progress, our communities are being violently torn apart by a system that values wealth over well-being, power over people, and unchecked development over dignity. Our city's leadership has embraced the rampant development in the name of housing, but I ask, who is being housed? Who is being left behind? Families that have lived here for generations, who've contributed to the culture, the history, the love, the fabric of Philadelphia, they're being forced out. They're being displaced, pushed aside, and treated without care. This is not just happening, it's being allowed to happen. Developers, many of whom are not even Philadelphians, hide behind shell companies, tax breaks, and zoning loopholes to seize land and build without accountability. This is the city of brotherly love, brotherly and sisterly love. And they've tried to bury us under cookie-cutter, culturalist condos. They tried to cover us with evictions, neglect, and injustice. They've treated us like dirt. But what they do not realize is that we are the seeds. We are the seeds, and these are seeds of love. And so we ask that you continue to nourish these seeds and pass legislation. I can't list everything, all of our demands, but you're hearing them today. And again, we thank you to be in this with you all. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for being here today and for the wonderful space, wonderful and loving space that you continue to steward at One Art. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you. And will the clerk please call the next public commenter?
Ray Huxon, Craig Summers, Martha Mosley.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your comment.
Craig William Summers, and I'm here
on behalf of the Tenants Committee from the Hardy Williams Veterans Apartment Complex in Southwest Philadelphia. We've been going through a lot of situations that shouldn't be happening, a lot of things that should be happening aren't happening. It's supposed to be a senior citizens complex, and it's like, I was actually at Bert Shalom House before I moved there, and I had to move out of Bert Shalom House because of this. I was part of the tenant committee there, and now I'm part of the tenant committee where I'm at now because I thought it was a better place, and it's not at all. No, the mismanagement going on there. The owners of the building really don't know what's happening. It seems like they just don't care about us, and we need change. And Councilman O'Rourke, you were there when we protested. They retaliated on us by taking the shopping carts from senior citizens that get their groceries out the car. We had 2 carts, and they took the carts away, and people were struggling for over 2 months, and still are struggling now because they replaced the 2 carts with just 1 cart, and it has 2 handles. It doesn't have a bar in the front to hold on to for people with disabilities to be able to use. It's sad. I have a picture of it if you want to see it, but it's deplorable things that are happening there. It's not good. It's not good for anyone. So we just want change, and want to thank everyone for their help, but we need to do a lot more.
Thank you so much, Mr. Summers. I'm so sorry that you would have to go from one really bad experience to another. This is something that's not uncommon with our subsidized properties, unfortunately. A lot of the owners aren't sort of making the repairs that are necessary, but we want to help with this issue. I know that you're talking with various council members.
Definitely.
I believe that this is in the council president's district, potentially, or what is? Yeah, it is. Okay, so I just want to make sure that he's also plugged into this issue, and we'll do our best to help make this a better situation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you. Take care.
Will the clerk please call the next person for public comment?
Maria Yalverton, Rashida Price, Rosa King.
Good afternoon. So good to see you, Rashida. Thank you so much for being here. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your comment.
You can adjust the mic to where you want it, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today and hearing us out. My name is Rashida Price. I'm a homeowner and a community leader, a committee person, and I'm here representing One PA West Southwest Rising, which is an organization that includes both renters and homeowners. I want to thank you all for your ongoing support. I know that you all are staunch advocates for affordable community housing, so so I'm here to urge council to continue to support us in safe and affordable housing for all Philadelphians, particularly low-income and working-class residents. As a former renter, I understand how proactive rental inspections can greatly contribute to ensuring quality of life. That's what I'm really here to promote. Oftentimes, renters and homeowners are pitted against one another despite their urgent housing concerns overlapping. There's no new news for you all that we in Philadelphia are facing a housing crisis. Renters live in unsafe conditions, which other panelists have detailed, and it's created a public health crisis. Homelessness is rising at an alarming rate due to corporate greed and people being displaced. And big landlords are profiting from low-income Philadelphians' collective misery. On top of all of that, poorly maintained properties encourage criminal activity and increases further threats to public safety. So then we're fighting on all these different fronts. And even though I'm a homeowner, because there's still rental properties in my community, it affects me as well. We at One PA West Southwest Rising strongly urge council to join us in supporting the Safe and Healthy Homes campaign by voting to grant $10 million for proactive rental inspection and $10 million for low-income home repairs. Property maintenance is a form of community investment. Well-kept homes contribute to a safer, more attractive, and more prosperous neighborhood for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely right on everything you said, and the public safety aspect. I just read an article yesterday in the Inquirer that teens are more likely to carry a gun if the surroundings around them are in disrepair. So this affects us in many, many ways. Good afternoon. Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your comment.
Hello, my name is Maria Yelverton, and I'm a member of Philly Drive. I am a District 7 resident. I'm speaking on Resolution 240 to 267. I need to move out of my current apartment as soon as possible because the conditions there are unlivable. I have not had hot water for 1.5 years. Throughout the winter, in order for me to take a warm shower, my daughter has to carry boiling water up a flight of stairs into my bathtub. And this is dangerous. And this is on top of the fact that I continue to pay my rent every month. Why is it that my landlord can get away with these dangerous, unlivable, inhumane conditions and still continue to make a profit? It is not right. We need L&I to hold corporate landlords accountable to make needed repairs. This is not the first time that I experienced unlivable rental conditions. I remember raising my young kids in a house that was filled with mold. My son suffered significant health challenges, God bless his soul, because of this environment, including throat cancer. It's clear we need more rental inspections, but not only that the process for calling L&I should not only be reactive. We need L&I to inspect rental units before people move in so that these issues can be prevented. I hope that the City Council will act in support for that, and everyone, including low-income renters like myself, can live in a safe and healthy home. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for sharing your story, and I'm very sorry to hear about your son. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your comment.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here, council members. My name is Rosa King. How are you all? I thank God, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, for the opportunity to be here. I am accustomed to being evicted, 5 times when my children were small, and they're grown now with their own children. But where I currently stay, I was without heat for 3 years, from 2013 to 2016. And as a result, I am now severely anemic. I've also been harassed by L&I to get into my house, even though I told them that they can come in with the property managers with the keys, because I'm constantly at the doctor's office for my problems of being diabetic type 2 and severely anemic that causes ongoing symptoms. I just want to say that something does need to be done for low-income tenants. I am in project-based housing, which means my voucher stays to the building so that if I leave, I will no longer have subsidy. I need the subsidy. I'm on SSI. I do have a work history. I would like to return to work one day, but I have to put my health first, and it's becoming like just ludicrous because I should be able to work. and not all the time have to take care of health issues because my property is in improper condition right now. And so please consider whatever laws that need to be made. And just so the record shows, I was always evicted the 5 times by slum landlords that the law said I should have never been evicted from, and I was paying my rent. It's like one landlord I didn't pay my rent to. I used the money to send my son to acting school because I was just fed up. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for being here. I'm sorry to hear about everything that you've been going through. Do you still need action from LNI today?
Yes, I still need actions for them, but I don't need the harassment. Don't make me feel like an ant under your feet because I said I give you permission to go in with my housing manager in spite of your desperation for court. I don't trust the Department of LNI because you allowed me to live without heat for 3 years. And at the time, my sons were younger. They're grown men now. But I had to send them to live other places while I stayed there to sustain a roof where I was freezing inside more than outside. It doesn't make any sense.
You're right, that's unacceptable, and we're happy to follow up with you after the hearing to get that taken care of.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks
you.
to all of you. Will the clerk please call the next person for a public comment?
Madam Chair, there is no one else on public comment.
Okay. Is there anyone else to testify on this resolution?
Speak to the mic, you can adjust it to it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, as well as other council members and associates, members of the audience, and different groups. I must apologize, I was not ready for this.
That's the first time I ever asked, is there anyone else to testify, and there was somebody
I
to
appreciate
testify.
that ain't nothing but God.
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your comment.
Sure, thank you. My name is Sharice L. Kitchens, and I don't belong to any particular group, but I'm here on behalf of myself and so many others in the city of Philadelphia, as well as all of these groups who have testified. I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to be able to speak, because I think that, and I may have spoken to you or some of your representatives in the past or sent letters. I'm so sorry what happened to the young lady. I'm so sorry if I cannot remember your last name. However, I remember the incident. And it comes to the point where a lot of these things could have been prevented if the city of Philadelphia or if different administrations follow similar programs that work. In the past, the city of Philadelphia had the sheriff's department to do evictions. It's been a long, long time. I don't look as old as I am. However, I did send in a letter to the housing director at the time after this young lady's incident, and my heart felt for her. However, as far as landlords go, and as far as the L&I department, one who's done inspections under PHFA, Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, also managed properties with PHA as well, and market rent properties. It is imperative that the funding be granted, not just for L&I workers itself, but they may need an assistant to go along with them out in the field. Now, we're talking about low-income housing, but it just doesn't do that too. I'm in Cindy Bass's district. I was in Curtis Jones' district when something happened to me. I got evicted with the management company manipulating my checks, bringing in the U.S. Treasury because they manipulated it, they processed it, and I still got evicted. I still have a judgment. Now, when I say, did I struggle? I'm disabled. I may not look it because you cannot judge a person by their visual appearance. I lived in market rent, housing. And I basically was harassed beyond being harassed. Locked out under a key fob system. Not being able to get into the building itself. Then these landlords actually offer a concierge service, but then they eliminate them. So no one has access, not even L&I. And the same organization, which is Montium Management Company, and I lived in a 500 unit building, 250 units on each side. They did not pay any taxes. They did not have a license certificate to operate, but they received funds and continually re-enrolled people, then took them to court. A building having 500 units, how do you take 198 people to court? This all happened during the pandemic. The back end of my building looked like a shopping center because people who moved out just left. To this day, some of these same people have judgments against them. I fought mine, but everything has to line up. Every city agency needs to line up going across the board. The city of Philadelphia has to develop a partnership with the state, with the city, state, and federal government regarding housing. We all occupy the same land, and something has to be done. That's why if L&I they said 10 million, another million, making 11 million or $12 million to ensure that you end up getting what is rightfully owed to any and all people in the city of Philadelphia. Now, surprisingly.
And can I ask that you maybe take the next 20 seconds or so and wrap up your comment?
Okay, I definitely will. The same things that these gentle people testified to in saying health issues, no one in this room is exempt from it because my building put in new heating systems, air conditioning systems, and mold was found inside of them. So when I tell you they're putting them in throughout the city of Philadelphia, all new developments are getting them. But if they're not maintaining them, and if they feel as though that they have not gotten any city, state, or federal government money, they feel as though that they can do whatever they want to do. And why should they not be able to continue to pay their renters' license fees and deny our children a proper education? Because those fees go to different city services. And I'm just saying, I wrote about this here. They changed it because I said allow the owners to be responsible for whenever a management company is going to switch over management companies. But the owner needs to be able to hold on to a license until they make that transaction. So no money can slip through the city of Philadelphia in which it has been denied. I'd like to thank you all, and thank you again, and I thank God for just allowing me to be here at this moment and be able to give my testimony to you all. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for making up your mind to speak today, and I love your ideas. Thanks so much. There's somebody else? Come on. I didn't know you were on our list. I'm so sorry.
I was not. I learned about this at last minute yesterday, and as you know, this is something that we are very we've been following closely at the Urban League of Philadelphia. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Abraham Reyes Pardo. I'm the Vice President of Housing at the Urban League of Philadelphia. The Urban League of Philadelphia is a civil rights organization that has been around for 108 years. Let me just say that I had something prepared, but the testimony today was so powerful that there is very much more to say. I just want to say that we have assisted thousands of families at this point as a cornerstone partner with the Eviction Diversion Program. In the now 5 years of existence, we have identified a trend that has been shared here many times today. Tenants being agreeable to substandard living conditions at the fear of retaliation. A condition that exacerbates as the availability of affordable housing becomes more scarce. For us as housing counselors, we get to contrast this experience with our home buyers program. And let me just tell you why. In most home selling transactions, sellers must disclose everything they know regarding the condition of the property. They have to fill out a form that will be reviewed by the buyer and the agent. We go as far as reminding prospective buyers that they must opt into having an inspection of the property and make them sign an affidavit to confirm the information was both provided and received. The realtors enforce this requirement as well, as it allows them to negotiate the financial aspect of the transaction. It only makes sense that in addition to the 10, 12, 11 millions that L&I could potentially be receiving in funding, it only makes sense to incorporate a similar procedure for transactions involving rental units. These procedures should be familiar to many managers, as many of them are also part of the realtor community. We know that because they've been opposing some work on the record sealing side. So we understand that. As the housing industry relies more often on algorithms to make their decisions, we must make sure to close the gap of information with a human approach, whether it's to verify a record for a tenant or the condition of a property before someone moves in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abraham. We greatly appreciate the work of the Urban League. Okay, so seeing no one else here to testify on the resolution, this concludes the business of the Joint Committees on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless, and licenses and inspections for today. The public hearing on resolution number 240267 is recessed to the call of the chair. Thank you all very much for your attendance and participation. Have a great day.